I'm not used to this.
Hit it hard.
There. The June 11th meeting of the Durham Planning Board shall come to order. We will start with a roll call. Munish?
Yeah. Hello?
Introduce yourself.
Oh, Munish, yes. Hello.
Peyton McManus.
Michael Barron, Town Planner, and Rob Sullivan cannot make it tonight.
Paul Rasmussen.
Sally Tobias.
Heather Grant.
Gary Whittington.
Do we have any members on Zoom?
Eric Lund, council alternate.
Oh, that's right, Eric. There's Eric.
Anyone else? Okay. I expect Richard to be joining by Zoom in a few minutes. In the absence of Rob, I'll sit Munish as in that seat for tonight. So, any adjustments to the agenda? No. I'll move that we accept the agenda.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
We don't have to do a roll call vote since we don't have any voting members on Zoom yet, right?
Correct.
Correct. Okay.
As our note.
Town planners report.
Nothing to report this evening.
Nothing to report. Okay. We do also have a guest. You might have missed him.
Peter Howd.
Peter Howd. Yes, Peter Howd's a prospective alternate member of the board. He's attending a meeting tonight as he decides whether or not we're worth joining.
And vice versa, right? Proof of life.
Reports from board members who serve on other committees.
Town council.
Town council can go first.
Okay, so we met on June 2nd. There was just some unanimous consent items that were fairly light. One was just approving everything for Durham, Downtown Durham Day, which is August 7th, so that's one of the unanimous consent items. And then we had, anything else that's important? Oh, we confirmed Juneteenth, Independence is a legally recognized holiday. So that was sort of getting rid of some of the little stuff. And then we had a presentation with the Executive Director of Blue Ocean Society for Marine Conservation. It was very interesting. They had been and reported last year as well and talked about trash collection. And, you know, they do a statistical analysis of what kinds of things they pick up when they're doing beach cleanups, which is it was really nice to see the information. It's on the website if anybody wants to see it. There's a PowerPoint in the meetings folder on the Down website. We also had an annual report from the Human Rights Commission, and then most of the meeting was discussing the town council goals. So that's still in development. I think the big item that we really feel pressured with is certainly downtown and the health of the downtown. So, you know, the working on, you know, with the zoning and the incentives and really paying attention to the challenges that we have there. And it looked like from Todd's report out to us that the Durham business community is starting to get back together to bring the group into that forum of the Downtown Business Association kind of thing again. So we're hoping that can be jump-started, and that would be good, and it'll have town council representation on it, and we hope that helps bring, you know, better communication to the businesses and the town. Yeah. So that's all I have.
All right. Housing, you want to do housing?
Since you're the rep. Housing Task Force met on Monday morning, and we completed our work on our general zoning suggestions, and we have moved that on to the planning board. And is there a copy of that anywhere?
No, I'll have that soon. and
Okay,
forward
so
on.
to be watched. We thought that through. Most of our, well, all of our suggested changes really came from what we're seeing, what we saw from our conversations with our different community and committee members, so that we spoke to throughout the process. With considering some things, of course, from our KG report, and of course, you know, the request from the council to bring some vibrancy to the downtown. So I think it's good. Oh, you can't hear me?
No.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess it needs to be louder. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So that will come to the planning board here as soon as it can fit onto an agenda.
Yeah. It'll be a few meetings.
It'll be a few meetings from now.
All right. And the only other note on the Housing Task Force is, at this point, we're reviewing whether or not there's anything more for
Yeah.
us to do.
Yeah.
We may end up, and if we don't find anything more to work on, then we'll go back, plan on go back to the town council and say, we think our job's done.
Yeah.
So,
If the council has any suggestions as to what they'd like us to finish, they can let us know. Otherwise, we have completed our tasks. So we have put through quite a few zoning changes that have already gone through. Some have already gone through council, some are still get to the council, and this will be the last one that we did.
all right. No. All right. Public comments. I would like to take the microphone first for public comments. Just bear with. Erica, could you join me?
Who's going to take the picture?
You got your camera ready, Michael?
So, Erica's had to step down from the board due to little person reasons.
Complications.
But, what we'd like to do is, as a show of our appreciation, Erica Nauman-Gayet, in recognition of your commitment and contributions while serving as Durham Planning Board member from November 6, 2023 to April 30th, 2025, your dedication to the betterment of Durham and its citizens is laudable and greatly appreciated by the community. Presented this 11th day of June, 2025, Paul Rasmussen, Chair.
There we go.
Nadia, you can smile.
He's like, what's the guy talking about? He looked at Paul. I was like, who is this guy?
Okay.
And that includes the
Thank you.
appreciation to our youngest planning board member.
Soon.
Yeah, so I
Only a
know.
few years to go.
She was here through that whole time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
We actually have two.
All right.
I have two.
Thank you for that, for your patience. Is there anyone else who would like to speak during public comments?
Joshua Meyerowitz, 7 Chesley Drive. I also appreciate, as I always said, your work on these boards, but I also always try to push. I don't say I can do better than you. I don't say I don't question your good intentions, but I always try to push for information to the public and following proper posting of minutes and following the RSA and so forth. So I just was moved by today's headline in Foster's about 800 home development planned in Dover, and it reminded me that I've written previously and spoken previously to Michael and also to Sally Tobias, just questioning about whether we in Durham keep track with all our concern about housing limitations and not living in an island hundreds of miles away from Dover and Portsmouth and Rochester, whether anybody is keeping track of developments that are planned in our community, within the range of where people commute to and from to work in Durham, and so forth. And so I would just again encourage someone at the Housing Task Force. No one has answered me about that those queries. Housing Task Force Planning Board, a file somewhere, in keeping with a university town tradition of information and resources and files of what's happening in terms of proposed and accepted planned development that would affect our plans about what we think we need in housing. So that's all. So I hope that that is being done by somebody.
We rely on the Stratford Regional Planning Commission.
You
for
rely on
regional
the which?
On the Stratford Regional Planning Commission.
And
for that
do we
information.
have their files on this?
They keep us up to date periodically with things
And is
going
that
on.
posted anywhere for the public?
No.
All right, so I just would,
Although to speak to that, the Stratford Regional Planning Commission does have a very robust website with a lot of excellent content up there. So if you go there, there's a lot of data, there are a lot of
Yeah.
reports, there are GIS overlays, there's a lot of information up there.
Right.
And I'm not sure that everyone takes advantage of it, but there is a lot of information at a regional level.
And also at the local level, if you can, on their menu, you can go into the towns we serve and then click on Durham, and it'll pull up Durham, all the Durham-specific reports.
all the Durham which report?
Durham-specific reports that they have. and
But I
data.
was asking about Durham affected development where it's not in Durham, but maybe affecting our planning and thinking. And so just an encouragement. Also, as you'll hear me comment again later, I think there's a big distinction I've written about in my research between technically public information, but that is functionally sort of private public, where you have to do a lot of work to find it, and public information, where people are constantly informed about it and have easy access to it and are encouraged to engage with it. So just a friendly suggestion to try to keep the public as informed as possible, and you guys, when you're thinking about what rules do we want to change locally to enhance housing, in the context, though, of the commutable distance around town, that's all.
Well, in reality, the prime number I always watch is the one that comes out each month that tells me what the vacancy rates are, and that's in the basic news.
I'm sorry, I didn't really hear you that well.
The vacancy rates for home ownership and rentals, that's the data I watch.
Right, okay.
Still
So-
less than 1%.
So again, the more that there's, for people who are concerned without doing a lot of extra work, and if there are moves that can be made that can facilitate large groups of people who are interested in knowing this without each one having to do their own investigation, I think it just helps. It helps to conform, that's all.
I think it's a terrific idea, and I would say that, recently I've been following a lot of Substacks, and a lot of people are using Substack as a new essentially blogging platform, but they're aggregating a lot of information and then creating, whether it's New Hampshire politics or whether it's something local, could be something that, an active citizen could take that and run with it and and create a lot of useful content that could then be referenced and used later, and it's persistent, right. So that could be helpful.
And also we could link to the university with students who are looking for projects related to their majors, and could have that as a service activity, linked to the planning board and links in Friday update. I mean, you guys can think of lots of ideas too, but I just think, I keep thinking, who's keeping track of this that I and my neighbors can get easy access to without doing a lot of individual research, that's all.
There's also a lot of good information on the Housing Task Force website.
All right, I'll
Articles.
check that out again. Thank you so much.
And if I might add, just on a very basic level, in my conversations with some of the people in Dover, their housing navigator, Dover is still well under their pinpointed number that the state did ask them about. So they've done a lot of housing, but they are still under their amounts. And as far as the Housing Task Force, we are really looking at increasing housing for that group that is very much missing in our town. And we had a general number of units that were definitely missing, even adjusted down from student rentals.
Understood. All right, thank you very much.
Anne Marie Harris, 56 Oyster River Road. It occurs to me that some synthesis of this information might be made more publicly available through Friday updates. Many of us older don't do whatever you described. And the Friday updates are really lengthy and could be modified, and some of the more important information for the town directly, rather than departments, put farther up in the Friday updates where you don't have to get all the way to the bottom, click thing that tells you what the next reference is. However, I am actually responding to Joshua because I just read that Torrington is probably going to close Fox Run Mall by December, and they're going to put in housing, multiple housing. And I wonder if we're pushing our zoning considerations too fast. And I'm going to later speak to the concern about lodging as a substitute for what our previous definitions have been for trying to manage the intrusion in our lovely town of too much student and transient housing. Thank you.
Is there anyone in Zoom that wants to speak?
Nope, it's just Eric. Unless Eric would like to say something.
Okay, so we just have Eric still? All right, thank you. All right, so we have, excuse me? We have minutes of April 23rd.
Matt Kamanchak, Thompson Lane. Thank you for your service to the town. Just to sort of respond to what was just sort of the recent discussion between Professor Meyerowitz and the board, I think he expresses a desire that many people in the town have, which is for greater transparency, greater sharing of information with the public. And I believe that if you review the last meeting, I think which was on May 14th, you had a procession of people here asking for more information, asking for, as Mrs. Harris said, synthesis of information, asking to have access to the same information that you're relying on in your decision making, so that we know what you're relying on, where you're coming from, and whether you are relying on facts, on supposition, on data, on whim, etc. It would be very helpful to know where the Housing Task Force is coming from, and also to know where the Planning Board is coming from. And there seems to be, I don't know, perhaps, I think a lot of people feel that not enough information is being shared. And as you know, we have recently had changes in residential zoning. There are proposed additional changes for residential zoning. There are proposed changes for Central Business District 1. There are proposed zoning changes for Central Business District 2. There are proposed zoning changes for the Churchill District. And there are zoning changes proposed for the Courthouse District. In addition to that, there are workforce, or what used to be called workforce housing initiatives, then became affordable housing initiatives, now is attainable housing initiatives. I'm mentioning that to the public because that's the kind of information that's helpful to the public when they're trying to follow what's going on. And it's true, people can go and watch many hours of videotapes and find out for themselves, which is what I've done. But it's not really practical, and it would be very helpful. I think that part of your job is to communicate with the public. Even though you have a lot on your plate, I still think that part of your job, or part of the town planner's job, is to communicate about your deliberations and your approach to the public. And I don't think that's being done adequately. Okay? I asked Todd Selig personally if he would make a presentation about these many, many zoning changes to the town. Get up for the town, advocate for these zoning changes, tell us why it's a good idea, tell us how these various components are coordinated, and he directed me to watch a workshop that you had done. I believe it was back in May, and I did watch the workshop. It was helpful, but it only answered a small portion of my questions and didn't really get to the central crux of the matter. Robin Mower at the last planning board meeting asked you if Michael Barrett, the town planner, would make a presentation about these many zoning changes and the degree to which they're coordinated and so forth, so that the town would better understand where you're coming from. And when I asked Robin whether that was in the works, she indicated to me that it's not. Now, I hope that it is in the works, but I think that would go a long way to, let's say, restoring the public's confidence in the board. Somebody from the Housing Task Force could also make a presentation, since many of the ideas that are driving these zoning changes are coming from the Housing Task Force. It might make sense for the leader of the Housing Task Force to get up before the community and make a presentation and say, this is why we're making these changes. It's not helpful to be directed to more than 3 years worth of documents on a website when you ask a simple question about, how are you substantiating this claim? Well, you can go look at these 50 odd documents on the website. That is not practical. What's practical is having one person who has been involved in the project synthesize the information for the public, provide key findings or key drivers or key elements, whatever you're hanging your hat on, and explain the thinking, explain the strategy, and but so far, town administrator, AWOL, town planner, AWOL, housing task force, AWOL. Now, there seems to be, what I'd like to do is read to you I asked for findings from the Housing Task Force, and I was told that the findings were the same as the consultants, so that the Housing Task Force doesn't have its own findings. It has just adopted or accepted the conclusions that came from a professional consultant. And when I said, well, so this is a 223-page report. So again, does it make sense for every person in the town, 14,000 residents or whatever it is, to go and read a 223-page report? Or does it make sense for somebody from the Housing Task Force to summarize the key points that are made in the 223-page document? I would argue that it makes more sense for somebody from the town, a town representative or a paid employee of the town, to step forward and summarize the key elements of the consultant's report. Now, I asked Michael about Housing Task Force findings, and what he told me was, well, you won't find them in any one place. So again, that would require, number one, I would have to go through 50 documents to find what I think are your findings, the Housing Task Force findings, right? And even then, I couldn't be certain of what is a finding and what is not. What would make a lot more sense is for somebody from the Housing Task Force to actually make a list of findings. And to Michael's credit, he went through the documents and he provided me with the findings from the Housing Task Force. Now again, the Housing Task Force is what's driving a lot of these proposed zoning changes. So I would like to read these findings, which are draft findings that were sent to me on May 9th. And by the way, they haven't been posted on the website, so no one else is privy to them. But I would like to read them for the public. And I'll leave it up to the planning board and also to, let's say, the court of public opinion as to whether they find these findings to be valuable. Finding number 1, Durham is part of a larger community. Finding number 2, Durham residents rely on workers who live in a wide geographical area and often have long commutes. Finding number 3, Durham is not affordable to many and offers few housing opportunities for those who want to live here. Number 4, Durham suffers from a lack of growth and a lack of diversity. 5, many residents feel Durham has a moral responsibility to help alleviate the housing crisis. 6, there are very few opportunities for people to rent housing in Durham that is not oriented toward college students or seniors. 7, there are very few homes for sale that are affordable to those of middle and moderate incomes. 8, Durham's future housing needs for non-students by 2040 is 455 dwelling units. There are 4 more. They're rather lengthy. I can read them, or I can just have maybe Michael post them on the town website in the interest of time. These are the findings that are driving the zoning changes. They appear to me to be things that would have been known to everyone in town before the Housing Task Force was even formed, more than 3 years ago. So I think that's important. I know one other point here regarding legislation coming out of Concord. I think this point has been made, and I think it's a good one, but it doesn't seem to be being heeded, I guess. I think it's unwise to go ahead with making zoning changes until we know what the parameters are coming from the state. And I think it's wasting a lot of time and effort and resources to do that without when they might have to be changed, in the coming months. So I wouldn't want you to have to, reinvent the wheel, so to speak. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I just make a few comments? And I commend you, and I think there's a very active citizen ecosystem that follows the planning board and a lot of other public operations, and the active citizenry is important. And so I commend you. I think there are a lot of people that watch, not a lot, but there's a few, and they actively watch the planning board. They actively watch the digital content that's posted. In many cases, they aggregate it and synthesize it and then send it out in emails that are very useful. Sometimes you just need to be on that email list. I would agree it might be better to have the people that do that make those public instead of email, but it's terrific that they're doing that. And I would say that there's a massive amount of digital content out there, and it's difficult to organize it. So I'm sympathetic to a lot of what you say, but I will say that through the process, a lot of the information that was shared in a lot of different formats speak to exactly what you're asking for. And the difficulty is how do you organize and distill hundreds of hours of public comment? How do you organize and distill hundreds of emails? How do you distill a 250-page document? One barometer is you can just pull up Zillow and you can just look at price history over the last 20 years. The market's judging every day supply and demand constraints. So there are different ways to perceive this. I would also agree with you that if you roll back before 3 years, it's obvious there's an issue. And then the question is let's collect some data. let's organize a process to think about how to address that issue and then move forward. So I'm very sympathetic to a lot about what you say, and I'm very happy there's an active ecosystem of concerned citizens, and this dialogue is important, and it's good to hear what you have to say. And it's unfortunate, there is a lot of information out there. It's just very difficult to distill it and synthesize it. But, I wrote a letter where I, pulled back 10 years of Zillow data and did a comparison with other college towns. And unfortunately, we're 50% higher in average home value or home price, and our professors don't get paid anymore. So there's a lot of data that's out there, and I hear you on that, and I'm glad that you attend and you watch.
You go.
And in the,
Since he's making a comment, you're new in Durham, relatively. I don't know how long you've lived
How long
here.
have you
Well,
been here?
I've only been here since 2000, so many people in Durham would consider that I'm new.
So the
25
previous procedure for this type of consideration for major changes went through first the master plan, and then through forums, including the public. And what you're doing is trying to do a synthesis with a very few number of people who are engaged and a whole bunch of people who aren't following it. You think they are, but they're not. And you're only here since 2000? I could count a lot
I
longer
apologize
than
for
that.
but
Okay.
I'm trying to pay my
and
dues.
I've already said it to everybody, and you probably know it. I've been on planning board, I've been on council, and I've been on, all of those things. So the process has changed considerably to the exclusion of the majority of the population. And I think that Michael should be responsible for synthesizing and getting it out to us, if not in some better form, then the least could be at least Friday updates.
and to the one, Matt, in defense of the Housing Task Force, I just want to point out that, yes, everybody knew this before the Housing Task Force came on board, but one of the things the Town Council asked of the Housing Task Force was collect the data and prove it and show it to us.
And show it to us.
We did.
And and if you'll recall, there was a housing needs assessment that was come up, that was presented out.
There were two presentations to council.
Was couple of presentations to council. It had all that information in it. There's been nothing to contradict any of that information that's ever been raised that's been found. So we showed it to
Can
you.
you reference the information? Where is this? And
The housing needs analysis?
you're talking about the RKG report?
The RKG
Yes.
report, yes.
It's-
Yes. And there's been nothing that has been found to contradict that report in any future data.
That's because it hasn't been scrutinized by the Housing Task Force. If it had been scrutinized by the Housing Task Force.
We can't hear you.
Yeah. So, So I'm not here I don't want to belabor this, but there's been no interpretation of that report by members of the Housing Task Force. And if one looks at that report, one immediately sees some things jump out. For example, that report refers to workforce housing, which you in the last meeting told us that has a very specific legal meaning in the state of New Hampshire, and that you had moved away from using the term workforce housing because you wanted to avoid legal complications that are associated with that definition. And so now you went from workforce housing to affordable housing to now it's attainable housing, right? If you look at the 223-page report, you will see one use of the word attainable. And it's not used in any official manner. It is absolutely riddled with the term workforce housing. So that would lead somebody to question, right? They did a report with certain assumptions, the assumption being workforce housing with a specific state definition. And you have now embraced a totally different approach that is not supported by the 223-page report that virtually no one has read. And I would argue perhaps even members of the town boards haven't read all 223 pages of that. So that's just an example of where you can puncture holes. And they also exaggerate the growth in Stratford County, of the need for housing in Stratford County. And I don't think they mentioned that the need for housing in Durham, that the population in Durham actually declined between 2020 and 2023. So anyway, there are holes that could be poked in that finding, and I'm sure that the bulk of it is very good work, but it would be helpful for somebody who has a stake here, either somebody from the Housing Task Force or somebody from the Planning Board, would tell us what in that report is so compelling to you. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that helps clarify things. Any more public comments? Bear with me a minute, I'm trying to figure out how to draft my note.
There's a couple more people on Zoom now, but no hands up as far as I can tell.
It's Richard.
Sorry, Richard.
All right, who are they?
Neither of them is Richard.
Okay, well, you said they have hands up for public comments?
No, they don't.
Oh, okay, thank you.
But none of them
I'm
are
sorry,
Richard.
I misheard. All right. Item 7, review of minutes, April 23rd. So, any changes that were sent to Karen or that need to be made here tonight?
One question. On page 8, line 16 of the April 23rd minutes, was the limit from CB2 to 4 stories? Was that the change that was made? Was that the change that was made?
Yes, we removed the option for the 5th story.
Oh, that was from 5 to 4? Okay.
Yes,
Yeah.
it was, because it would,
But is that
Before that-
CB2? I thought we did
Yes.
that in 1.
no, that was in 2.
The CB2 is the Mill Plaza
CB2
area.
So the Mill Plaza, we removed the section, we removed the option for a 5th story and
Okay.
capped it at 4.
Okay.
Anything else? I'll move, we accept the minutes of April 23rd.
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right, and minutes of May 14th.
Yes, page 5, line 28, Ms. Birch should be Carol Birch.
5, line. Carol Birch. Okay. Line 28.
Oh, Richard's here.
Sit over here today, right?
Very good.
Yay, you're here.
Couldn't log in.
Oh, no.
Sorry. Anything else?
I'll abstain, I was not here for that meeting.
Counselor Lund, you'll be voting for this one?
Okay.
So we'll do a roll call vote. So, Munish? Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Peyton? Aye. Paul Rasmussen? Aye. Sally?
Sally Tobias, aye.
Abstain.
Heather Grant, oh, I'm sorry.
For illness.
You're not voting. Gary's aye, and Eric Long for council?
Aye.
Aye, very good. And Richard Kelly was also absent for that, so he'll be, all right. That gets us to item 8. 121 Technology Drive, 2 industrial warehouse buildings, conceptual review of site plan to develop 2 162,000 square foot industrial warehouse buildings, map 204, lot 2. Sean Smith, in care of RJ Kelly, property owner and applicant, Office Research Light Industry District. This is, as a conceptual review, this is a discussion only. There's no decisions being made tonight. The applicant is showing us what they're doing and getting feedback from us on areas of concern. Mr. Smith.
Thank you, Chairman. Remind me how these work. I push these down? Or
Nope.
Don't need
It's
to?
always
Yeah, you
live
don't
unless
have to
you
do
push
it.
it down.
Okay, I prefer to be standing up usually, but I'll be in front of my PC tonight, so forgive me.
If you wish, you could stand at the podium. I think your PC will reach.
Will it reach? Okay.
Yep.
Sure, you can move that around.
Make sure these things will load up for me. They were working. There it goes. Okay, can everybody hear me okay? Good evening. Happy to be back representing RJ Kelly Company in front of the Durham Planning Board as well. As unfortunately, Brandon Kelly, our president and CEO, wanted to be here tonight, but he has a senior daughter, and we all know this time of year can be very, very busy for parents of seniors. So he sends along his best wishes to the board. Tonight, I would like to present our conceptual idea for a couple of additional industrial buildings located at 121 Technology Drive in Durham in the ORLI zoning district to enhance the current investment we have in the campus as it sits. As many of you may recall, we were before you, I believe, 2 years ago, Michael, maybe somewhere in there, to show our proposed site and building improvements in order to create our investment and our vision in the existing 500,000 plus square foot building, which has gone very well. We've been able to place many tenants, some warehousing, including UNH. The Olson Center is still there. And a division of Raytheon has joined the campus in 50,000 square feet towards the rear of the main center building, which we were very excited to bring to the town of Durham. I do have some pictures of that just for the board so they can see how they're going along. If I can move down here. Does not want to cooperate. There we go. So, we at RJ Kelly, we own about 6 million square feet now across Massachusetts and New Hampshire and New England in general. 2 million of that is here in New Hampshire, and a little over 500,000 of that is here in the town of Durham, just in this one asset. So we presented to the board some concepts, which you'll see on the left. Those existing conditions will be the next picture over. And then we had a progress photo of some of the work that we were performing over the fall and the spring. And now, far right, that's how it looks today as of about a week ago. You can see how at RJ Kelly, we like unboring industrial assets. We find that in this market especially, where work from home has become commonplace, where especially industrial properties need their employees to be present, we like to amenitize and create very interesting properties for our tenants. So the next slide will show some of the photos from inside as it sits now. Some of those amenitizations, we removed a whole section of floor to really open the space up. There on the bottom in the upper left, you'll see the main entrance for that Raytheon tenant Brazonics. We engaged a muralist to paint a common area space in the upper right and a few other spaces throughout. In the lower left, that's an indoor bocce ball court, if any of you enjoy a little bocce ball. No sand, unfortunately. That's how I enjoy it. But and then in the lower right, it's just another look at some of the seating arrangements and things that we have going on in that main common area. So, like I said, we spent a lot of time, a very large amount of time, sometimes to our detriment, thinking very cleanly through what we want to present, what we want to create, and how to create it in meaningful and transformative ways. So it's just a little update on where we are with the existing building. Tonight, I'm in front of you for a preliminary presentation to the board to gather your feedback, your thoughts, your opinions as we move to expand this campus. And in a cooperative way, come up with a plan that works for both the town of Durham and RJ Kelly and our investors, and future tenants alike as we seek to bring more jobs to the city, or excuse me, to the town. The area, this is the existing conditions prior to our work at 500, mainly the work at, excuse me, on the 500,000 square foot building. The main work we've done outside, we've done a lot of stormwater enhancements. We've removed impervious cover. We're actively planting, overseeding. A lot of what we're using, obviously, is durable native plantings, avoiding lawn where we can, using some of the wildflower mixes you might see driving up 93 in those corridors, those types of things. So, and so we've done a good amount of work on the outside there, stabilized a lot of the pavement that was falling apart, and we are very proud of this asset, and we look to see the very final finished product as it's coming along here in the next couple months, hopefully. So the red area, that's the location that we'll be speaking about this evening. It's not perfectly covering the limit of work. It's just a rectangle placed on an existing conditions plan. You'll see that historically this site was always set up to be a campus, and you can see the paper street that was never constructed there along the southern and westerly edges of that red rectangle that goes up to another street at Beach Hill Road at the top. So we're mimicking, we're not exactly following that. We are mimicking the direction and the original intent of that plan. But one of the things to note on here, obviously, is the significant amount of wetlands. You can see how we really try to isolate our proposal to an area that avoided a great majority of those significant wetland systems that exist on the property, and of likely the most importance to the westerly edge along the border of Durham and Lee is the Oyster River, and you can see the riverine kind of pathway winding through the lower parts of those wetland systems. So our proposal does have some impacts to some of those areas. We sought to minimize those as much as we possibly could. The overall wetland impact compared to the vast majority of those wetland systems there is about 5,000 square feet. I couldn't even tell you what that is on a percentage basis because it's so de minimis by comparison. And they're really the upper reaches of those wetland systems. You're not getting down into the prime sections of those systems. So those are lower value type wetlands that we felt we could replicate or work with the town to create some other methodology that works for all of us. But the yellow sections are currently the 75-foot buffer to those wetlands. I understand there's some changes in the works that could increase that setback, but we'll continue to work with the town as, you know, the zoning sounds like it's ever evolving in many, many ways. So, you know, as we have in the past, you know, happy to be partners here in Durham and work with you to come up with something that works for all of us. I will point out that you can sort of see, if you can see my cursor, which is very small, and I apologize, I can barely see that. But this small little pink dot here is a isolated wetland that does not impound enough water to be considered vernal pool. I wanted to point that out. And it's less than 2,000 square feet, so it does not cross the threshold of jurisdictional buffer zones in the town of Durham. So that's why that doesn't have a buffer. For, the most part, the program is fairly simple. 262,000 gross square foot institutional grade industrial buildings. The loading for up to 120 dock positions and a shared truck court is in the back. The shared truck court was chosen to help reduce the impervious nature of the development, because you can share the area in between instead of creating two of those areas, essentially, right? If that makes sense. 8 driving ramps, approximately 370 new parking spaces. That's a little more than 1 per 1,000, but that we have found, and in speaking with our brokerage community, to be fairly consistent with what the market's demanding these days for parking. Obviously, all new landscaping, utilities, retaining walls we've used, especially on the westerly edge of the development here. This line, kind of hard to see, I apologize, but that is the 250-foot shoreland boundary to the Oyster River that we've sought to stay out of entirely with this development. We could have extended some of these buildings a little further, but we thought it responsible given the nature of the Oyster River. It's, yes, Paul?
Did you say 250?
250. That's the state jurisdictional limit for.
Okay, because on the drawing, I'm reading 200.
That is my mistake. That was a scrivener's error by me, and I apologize for that. But the boundary is, you can't see it on this. If I zoomed in, you would be able to see, but it is 250 on the survey.
Thank you.
So thank you for clarifying that.
Can you trace, please, the Oyster River, just once again?
Yeah, can you see my
On
cursor
the
okay?
side.
Can you see my cursor?
It's right at the very edge.
It's on the left side of
It's
the
to the
screen.
very
To
edge.
the
of-
very,
I can show you where it is on your map,
it'll be
Gary.
easy to show them on the map.
Okay.
The other thing I can do is just try to scribble something for you here. So
And
the
wait a
river
minute,
itself
to that,
comes.
This is the jurisdictional limit?
Correct.
Okay.
You see the call out there.
Okay.
Yeah.
See, it's
He's got it.
showing up in red now on the screen.
Trying to do my best for you here to show something.
Okay.
Gives you.
So that's the river, right? And
Right,
then,
I got it.
you got it?
Richard
Okay.
straightened me out. I just wanted to see the jurisdictional limit on the drawing.
sure, yeah, and I should have said this at the beginning, I apologize, but feel free to interrupt me. I want this to be a conversation. This is very informal
Yeah.
from my end.
It's fine. I think everyone else understood it.
Okay.
I'm relatively new to town.
Okay.
Can I just ask one question?
Yeah.
On the image that is on the website, it looks like that's also sort of sloping. Does that slope fairly dramatically down toward the river?
It does.
Yes, yeah, there is a lot of topography out here. And that's one of the things we're dealing with, and part of the reason we've really condensed this in a way that not only avoids those buffer zones, but minimizes the run out of
We
the
don't
grading.
saw a top of
avoid-
somewhere.
Just a point of clarification
Hey,
there,
I
sir.
saw there's a
You're
top
not
somewhere.
avoiding
That's what I'm
those
noting.
buffer
Yeah.
zones.
We're not avoiding them in
So
entirety.
what is the impact to the buffer zone? You mentioned the impact to the wetland area. Do you know what the impact is to the buffer zone?
Mr. Kelly, you're asking on a square foot basis?
Yeah, or acreage.
Or acreage? I can get that information for you. I
'Cause-
haven't added that up yet.
This is, by my calculations, about 23 and a half acres of disturbance. Does that sound about right?
We're a little north of 20, but it could extend that. I'm not going to argue that.
17.3 acres of impervious area, again,
Could be.
sound reasonable?
Yeah.
So it's, the earthwork operation that's going to occur out there is pretty significant.
Agreed.
You know, on the high end of this, we're seeing cuts of about 18 feet. And on the low end, though not as extensive, fills of 25 feet. Correct? Okay.
In some
Just wanted to
locations.
make sure I'm reading it right. Big job. Underneath that topography, is there ledge, or do we know it's clean digging all the way down?
We've done some geotechnical work, and there's some indications of ledge. There's some indications of some clay materials. This entire area, we've encountered some clay So we don't expect in terms of the stormwater, that's why we have 4 large basins, because we do expect to have minimal infiltration on this one.
I could go for a while, so why don't we let him?
Let him finish, yeah.
I honestly, I don't have a whole lot more. You already touched on, I've already spoken about the wetland impact. I've already spoken a little bit about the size of the disturbance, and we're avoiding the shoreline, so.
So I guess I'll cut to the chase then. Why not keep the work out of the buffer?
In this case, as you mentioned, this is a significant operation, which will
So we
carry.
see the lower left-hand corner has an impact to a direct impact to wetland and the impact to the buffer. And then along what I'm going to call the northern edge, but I'm not yet sure which way's north. The
top of the page
yeah,
is north. Yes, sir.
Seems to me like if the project was smaller, there'd be no impact.
If the project was smaller, there would be, you could minimize the impacts, yes. I can't say for certain there would be no impact. The issue that we run into when we are looking to create a development like this, of course, is always cost to build. And when you have significant earthwork operations that you would take to create a development of this size, you need to spread that out across a larger amount of square footage in order to make it economically viable. If you cannot do that and you reduce the scale of the building too low, it doesn't. You no longer have a project, unfortunately. And obviously, I should vet that by saying we are very early. I don't even have pricing on this yet. I wanted to get your feedback first, so we can incorporate that into our conversations with, various contractors, engineers, architects as we move forward.
So I guess when you do come back with your proposal, certainly selling me on that will be important, okay? There's impact within the buffers that when I look at a plan of this size, well, if we shrink it, there's no impact. And the area, you're abutting a very sensitive environmental area. The other thing that you've touched upon it is you mentioned the stormwater treatment. And I think that's going to be a real challenge for those design professionals that you'll be working with. Over 17 acres of impervious area, that water quality volume by my calculations is just under 63,000 cubic feet. And you're showing 3 or 4 potential ponds?
4 potential ponds right now.
And let's focus. Can you zoom in on that?
I can do my best for you, yeah.
So the one up top, I really haven't spent a lot of time with that one, but the triangular one just below that driveway entrance.
Yes, yeah.
Well, the contour that I'm seeing on the low end of that, which is an existing contour of the driveway going out, is elevation 105. And any volume is going to have to be well below that elevation. And if we look at the other side, jeepers, where I'm going with this is that triangular shape is going to get smaller and smaller and smaller as we drop down from 105.
Right.
The other area I'd like for us to look at is along the northern edge where this wetland impact occurs. If you can zoom in on that impact, please.
This here?
Yeah. So here's what concerns me, and I'd like for you folks to alleviate my concerns. And certainly getting the heck out of that wetland and buffer would alleviate the concerns altogether, okay? But the elevation I see in the wetland where the limits of work are is elevation 132. And the elevation of the roadway, the high point in the parking lot, is 123. So that pavement is 9 feet lower than an adjacent wetland,
Yes.
which probably has a high water table.
Well, I wouldn't be able to answer that.
So,
but
no,
I
I'm not
hear your
expecting
point.
you today.
Yeah.
But that would be one of those concerns that when you do come back with the formal application in front of us, that we'd certainly like to hear about.
Yeah, I understand. So this is a dewatering concern then?
Yeah.
That's what you're worried about,
Yeah.
yeah. I think, this is an interesting area, actually, when you look at it, because, you're high here, right, 145. And then right now that grades down into these low points, and that's what's sort of
Right.
formed this upper, it's sort of like a meadow type wetland more than it is anything else.
A high meadow type wetland. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah,
So
because it is up there.
we're not sure, and we'll certainly look into this for you, but Gove Environmental did all of the survey, and they're very sharp. We can look at the report and have them do some
And so
investigations.
Gove did the survey, but they must have did they map the wetlands for you as well?
So I misspoke. So Gove did the wetland survey, they did the
They
wetland
did the
mapping,
wetland
they did the delineation.
Yeah.
Hayner
Yeah.
Swanson, now I think IMEG, they picked up all the flags.
So when you say these are lower value wetlands, I ain't one to judge a wetland. It's a wetland or it's not, but that's what Gove is informing you.
Gove will give us so typically, when I've done these, I'm not meaning to imply that they don't have value, certainly they have value, right? The upper reaches of those wetlands typically are lower value. They perform lower, they provide sort of low, what we, the typical classifications of wetlands, like habitat, drainage, hydric soils. When I say habitat, I'm thinking fauna, but flora certainly too, right? That's how we sort of map those out. And those upper reaches typically perform some of the functions more towards like the drainage side, right? I think, so when we go out and we look at these sites, we say, okay, which parts of these, like, I wouldn't want to come in and, for example, put a building right on top of this guy, right? Like, that's definitely a no-go. That's definitely a higher value portion of this series, but an upper reach typically has a little less function. And it's the same, I should say, on this side as well. So, right, so you have what you could consider sort of the main primary portions of this wetland that are a little bit further down in this area. And then you have these upper sort of drainage runnels that feed into the wetland, right? So this is where we're proposing those impacts, and I certainly understand your concern, and we can elaborate further on the nature of those particular locations and those impacts when we come back.
Yeah, that would be helpful for your cause. At least for me, it would be.
Okay.
So the point to remember is, you're going to have to sell Mr. Kelly on those buffer impacts.
Sure.
The drainage is the other one.
Mm-hmm.
And then that specific location on the north end, of course, that we just looked at, where elevation 132, where we do have a wetland, maybe it's one of those fingers that don't have as much value, but we would expect a higher water table, and we have a cut there of about 9 or 10 feet. And when you come back, would you be in a point to discuss with us more of the geology that's below the surface? Will you have enough holes poked in the ground?
We've already poked all the holes, so I have a full geotechnical report on this area. So we have some test pits, we have some holes, we have a good amount of info.
But we're not certain whether we'll be blowing ledge out of there or not?
Well, as you get into these, sometimes you get refusal. You're not sure if that's till or it's ledge. So I'll go back and revisit the report and see if there's any further indications. But right now, the current thinking is likely you're going to hit more till than you are ledge in most cases.
Okay.
Just because of the riverine nature of this location, right?
That's enough for me.
That's enough for you. Okay.
Thank you very much, by the way, for that.
Rob Sullivan called me just before the meeting, had a few things that he wanted to bring up. Like Mr. Kelly, stormwater management is going to be key to this project, right? We want all the runoff being captured. Nothing heading towards the Oyster River.
I'm sorry, can we clarify that nothing heading towards the Oyster River? Is
That's where it's all going to be going eventually.
Overland runoff, I assume?
Everything to be captured and
treated prior to discharge?
Treated prior
100%.
to it being released, yes.
Yeah, okay.
The And that's his big thing, really, was there, which is also, mine, against, with our MS4 reports and all, we don't want to see anything negative that would affect our MS4 reports.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Peyton?
Just for context, there was an excellent aerial image that was sent around via email. I don't think it made it to the website, but I was wondering if you could share that, just so, because it kind of visually depicts that slightly in a different, in a different way. Yeah, there we go. I guess it was the front of your deck.
Yeah, I kind of overlaid on top of it.
And then the Oyster River is on this side, coming on that side, heading down right there.
Yes, it's this area over here. That's right.
Yeah.
That's correct. Sorry.
And then the 370 parking spaces, I think I know how you calculated that, but that seems pretty heavy for that, but is it required that you have 370 parking spaces to meet the goals there?
So it's dependent upon, one of the things we'd like to do here is maintain ultimate flexibility, not only for tenancy, but to attract as many potential tenants as we can for the town and the job. So like, we don't want to, say, pigeonhole these buildings into just being warehouse buildings, right? So if there is an industrial user that, say, wants to come lease 40,000 square feet, it could be, a tech startup. It could be a lot of different things, right? We don't want to preclude them from being able to operate. And those sort of light industrial type uses that are allowed as of right here typically require more parking than you would with a normal warehouse building. So it does meet the bylaw, but your ordinance, but it does also meet the marketing requirements for those as well.
And you touched on something I wanted to make sure was clarified for not just us, but anyone watching, is even though you're showing a whole bunch of effectively transfer warehouse type truck parking, the goal here isn't that it would just be warehousing, it would be other industrial uses that would be there, which would potentially bring in a greater density of jobs and things like that.
That's right. So the existing building has that exact same use, and we don't propose to really change the campus feel of what's been happening here. So obviously it's a change, it's transformative change, right? But, in terms of just isolating it to just a distribution warehouse use, we don't have any intent of doing that. If on one side you can see that the portions of the building with the black roofs, right now those are being utilized as sort of a warehouse distribution type use. But then you have manufacturing in this section here, and you have research in this section here, and UNH, and some of these other sections, and we're starting to get, we have Airtho on the first floor of this office building, and we're starting to get a lot of attention from the completion of our amenities on a lot of other office users right now. So we're excited. We're hoping we continue to bring more businesses here, and this would just be an extension of that.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Can you speak a little bit to truck traffic? Any idea what might be generated? And I'm assuming they would be restricted to state roads, if not even Route 4.
The likely scenario is truck traffic will exit down 121 Technology Drive. I apologize, I don't have a full aerial for you of this location, but they'll drive, it's probably about 1,000 feet to Route 4, and then travel Route 4, likely more towards the seacoast of the 95 route. Less trips, likely more the other direction, back into Lee and through the lesser interstates, but there will probably be some trips there. And obviously we'll be doing a full traffic study on this. And part of the, the question that I had for the board is, as we proceed down this sort of mixed use type approach, we can certainly do 2 separate traffic studies, or we could do the most impactful one and present that to you and come up with ways to mitigate that. So it's the board's flavor on that. I'm happy to show you whatever you need, but it's something to think about.
well, you sort of have, most impactful can be taken two different ways, right? I mean, one way would be the most number of trucks, the other way would be the most number of small vehicles. So I'm not sure with regards to us, what we would consider to be most impactful. I mean, this is where if a better knowledge of what your prospective client mix, but even that could be potentially only short-term. Long-term, it might change. It could fluctuate easily between the two extremes over 20 or 30 years.
And the ITE manual for traffic engineering will define certain classifications that we can perhaps talk about ahead of time, get comfortable with. I'm happy to coordinate with Michael on that, whatever the board's flavor is. Like I said.
My main concern would be, I think, the effect of heavy truck traffic on Technology Drive itself. I'm less concerned really with traffic flow on and, onto 155A, I believe that is. That's 155A. To Route 4, because that's state road. But the, but whether or not Technology Drive, if its base and all is going to take that kind of wear and tear, could be, it's sort of my major concern, my first major concern there. And then if you aren't doing trucks, and if it is a large number of smaller vehicles, those will probably end up scattering once you get to off Technology Drive. They're going to be going up Madbury, Lee, back to Dover, things like that. And all the Dover traffic goes out, is going to turn right, go up to 155 and go out through Madbury. What do other people think?
Would you agree that the traffic impact is really going to be a function of the ultimate leasing outcome of your tenancy and how the property is tenanted? I mean, this would really be suitable. Would this be suitable for logistics, or are you really sticking more to the idea of light industrial stuff that's not going to just produce a continuous flow of trucks that would be present for, let's just say, logistical or distribution space?
Well, again, I don't think we want to preclude ourselves from any tenancy. We already have logistics happening in those areas. It's not like a FedEx. It's not FedEx. It's not, UPS or anything like that, but it's warehousing distribution.
The asset's really
no,
it's not. The asset is really not, and I'm just kind of speaking also for the public, the asset's not really designed to be logistical space producing a continuous flow of large trucks.
It's not targeted to be specifically logistics use, no, if that answers your question.
Mr. Kelly?
I just asked if it was Amazon, but that might be.
I think they want something bigger. Heather?
Well, just in general, if it's light industrial, they need warehousing space usually, because if they're assembling parts or whatever, you have to have an inventory location, and you're going to have the semis coming through. But that means good business. So the thought about the road, though, is significant, because if that's the road that we have to maintain, and it was never, really set up for that kind of in and out, we probably should have to consider what we do to make sure that is a well-maintained road.
And I think
at the cost.
that it's a valid point, right? You can't be driving trucks up and down a street that's not designed for trucks.
I don't know what it was set up for when it was Gauss.
Well, it was set up for a small number of trucks, not,
Data general.
But they would have,
But they were high axle loads, right? Because of what they were making there.
Yeah, heavy equipment.
So very heavy stuff coming in and out of there, and maybe
not to mention components and all of the things that went with the building of those.
And something we can do, and what I've done in the past, I can just do a pavement core in the street and see exactly what's there. Is it 6-inch pavement over 12-inch base? I mean, we can find out and see, and then work with our geotechnical engineers to make sure that's sufficient.
Is it high bay?
High bay, yes.
And is Technology Drive a town road?
Yeah.
right to the property line, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And where it intersects Main Street, right across the street from the DOT District 6 building, does the DOT have jurisdiction over that intersection because it's close enough to the Route 4 interchange?
I believe that's 155A at that
Yeah,
point,
Yeah, I think so.
which gives state full jurisdiction over it.
Google Maps refers to it as Sherburne Road in Lee and Main Street.
And Main Street, yeah, but
Yeah, pretty sure that's 155A.
Yeah, so, I think that, when you do come back here, if it's still more of a, exploratory in terms of who the tenant ultimately is going to be, this is a huge footprint. How many tractor trailers are we accommodating in that center area?
I have a maximum of 120 dock positions, so that's 60 per building, effectively.
Yeah. And
I think it is important to note that if, this manufacturing does not use as many dock positions, right? So there's opportunity to reduce that depending on the tenancy. It's going to be a function of what we can land here.
so kind of walk me through then how this concept came to be and not something similar to what we see to the east.
So in terms of, it was a lot of work back and forth with the brokerage community and what people are looking for right now, right? So we call sort of the unicorn building. If you're not, a lot of those tenants aren't in the market anymore. Target went into Hudson. I think most of us are aware of that large development. I think it's 1.2 million. Those are the kind of one-offs that aren't happening really as much as they used to. Right now, you're seeing more multi-tenanted building, which is why you see 4 entrances on each building, right? Our estimation on 160 is you might have 4 tenants at 40,000 square feet, depending on your demise inside the building. The depths of the buildings are determined by how logistical users use them. So in terms of the basis of logistics and distribution, you don't want to get too much more past about 250 feet. Once you get past 250, you have your speed bay and you have about 4 internal bays, and then the forks just take too long to get back and forth. So it doesn't really function for them as well. It's almost wasted space in the front, and users aren't taking that. So the 2 skin area buildings were born of that conversation. Prior, we actually had 3 or 4 different iterations before presenting this to you tonight that we vetted with the community, the brokerage community, and among other developers and just learning about what's going on these days. The one thing I would say about this particular setup is that, counter to what the market usually likes, which is dedicated truck courts, we did unite them, and that did reduce our impervious cover a little bit. You're saving about 70 feet of apron across the long side of that building in pavement by doing it this way.
Are there other environmental considerations beyond what's already been discussed here? Things like, the impact on the carbon footprint and emissions and this, that, and the other that have been considered as well in the planning, or?
At this stage, we have not gotten that far. The great thing about these buildings, though, is the roof is ripe for potential solar. It just depends on your use, because especially industrial, if you go out to 121 now, you won't see in a nice flat roof with all those potential skylights, you'll see a lot of equipment up there. And that's why it's very difficult to pre-plan for solar on these buildings, because you just don't know what somebody's going to need. You could put something in and then violate your lease because now you have to take 5 panels off to put in a rooftop AC or something like that. So one thing we did do, we did extend natural gas to the other building. I recognize that's fossil fuels, but a lot of these buildings these days are going the route of just pure electric, but that's one of our challenges here. given our conversations previously that we've had with Mr. Seelig, Michael. Eversource energy is the amount of energy and power that we have. So we're walking a bit of a fine line here, and we'll have to vet that through this process as well.
Okay, I just have a few questions.
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible just to go to Google Maps and just do, just beam in a first-person visual on Technology Drive? So just maps.google.com and just beam into this area and just take a look at Technology Drive just for a sec, just that road. Only because I have that here and I don't want to. I'm looking at it over here, but it'd be nice just to sort of visually see
I'm more
that.
than happy if I can get it to load. That is the big question.
He might not be on internet.
I may not be on it, but I have it on my phone
If
too.
you can just pull up on your internet browser
Durham
Guest, and it clicks on pretty quickly.
This is a test on
There you
using
go.
all of our AV.
There you go.
Well, I think last time we were here, they were installing a new system in the conference room, so let's see if it works.
And I guess my my thought is that you've got Clubhouse Drive there, and then you've got some other residential, and then
Yeah, the cottages.
yeah, and then if you were to pull the little guy down there and just drop it on the road.
Intersection good?
Yeah, that's perfect.
Okay.
So I guess the thought as I think about that, let's just say you had one tenant and it's 120 18-wheelers there. That feels like a lot of heavy traffic on that road if you have pedestrians trying to, let's say, bike to school, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
I already think it's dangerous biking just on that road because it's only paint protecting it. But I've certainly biked where I have 18-wheelers passing me close by, and it's disheartening. And so I guess I'm just sort of wondering about that as I look at that road with the cottages and the other sort of residential. I'm not sure what kind of what we have any purview on that, but that seems like 18-wheelers. If you had 10 of them moving an hour down there, that's a lot. If that was the use. So for me, that's a bit of a concern, which is you've got pedestrians potentially coming out of these residential neighborhoods, probably wanting to get downtown, potentially on electric bikes or bikes, and so that's a concern with that. Just another, are you imagining that you might have any idea of how many tenants? Are you thinking like one tenant or 10 tenants across those two buildings, or are you just sort of scoping it out so that you could do sort of a configuration of whatever is required?
It'll likely be a configuration of whatever is required, right? But the 4 entrances sort of contemplates a 4-tenant per building sort of concept, if that helps. Any one of those entrances obviously could be split into 2, and you might have 2 20,000 square foot tenants. But it's certainly set up that it can be demised in many different ways.
So I guess you could get 4 tenants that are all warehouse, or you could get one tenant that's one big portion of that that's doing something.
Potentially.
All right. And then one other question, and I think it was raised years back when you were doing the initial build out there, and it had to do with light. And it had to do with light that was being emitted out of that property, potentially to abutters, and whether that might impact them. I'm just wondering if there's any thought about, or if you've looked at just ways to minimize any light disturbance or anything going sort of out there to any of the other abutters.
Well, I'll say obviously everything we use out there, and even the heads we're replacing that were not compliant, will be dark sky compliant, right? So they'll be all directed to the ground. The nice part about the setup as well is, you will have some perimeter parking lot lighting, right? A lot of the parking spaces along the building will be likely illuminated by wall packs as opposed to actual post lighting. But the loading being contained the way it is, any sort of lighting in the rear for the loading specifically, sometimes you can see off those loading docks, there's these little arms with lights and things like that. That'll be shielded by the building, not only by the buildings, but by the trees surrounding the parcel. And it's very dense forest. It really is very dense forest. But then if I can continue that sort of nuisance conversation, if you'd allow me. Having the loading courts contained like that as well, the buildings are very good at sort of containing any noise from the loading as well. So, we had one of our initial programs had loading on the outside, and then we recalled that process, and I believe it was an abutter who raised those concerns, and we shifted our plan a little bit, and in this case we recalled that conversation. We made sure they were internal to the development.
Thanks.
Of course.
All right. Stepping back to your question about the traffic studies. Based on the conversation we had, I think having a selection of different data points that you analyze is going to be best.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you. And I hope you guys don't think I'm texting taking notes on my phone here. So.
Congratulations to his senior.
Anything else?
I just want to, because I gave the impression earlier that I was concerned about the square footage that you've identified for water treatment. And during the course of our discussion here, I've had time to just buggy the areas. And I think certainly in terms of your water quality volume, you'll have no problem, meeting that. Your pre-post flow analysis, I'd have to charge you for that.
I will say, one thing we're looking at here, just in the context of the stormwater conversation, is this reminds me of a lot of the work I used to actually do down in Virginia, where you had multiple basins, multiple unconnected ponds, retention basins with benches, and there was some concern from a citizen. And by the way, I have to congratulate the two letters we received. I don't know those folks who sent those along, but they were very thought out, and they're representing your town very well, so congratulations to them. Those, if we indeed go into like the retention basin, normally you see detention basins, they're dry, there's no water, and then they fill up and the water goes away. These may have more permanent pools in them. The permanent pools provide not only, permanent pools, they provide not only habitat, but if you add what's called a wetland bench, so you go down and you kind of flatten out for a little bit and then you come back up, you can plant wetland species in there that are very good at absorbing dissolved sort of pollutants. Normally when we do stormwater, we worry about the things that are attached to sediment, and that's why those deep sump catch basins and hydrodynamic separators and all those matter, because they take the sediment and they trap it, and the pollutants that are stuck on the sediment goes to the bottom, and then you pump it out and you take it to where it needs to go instead of into waterways and wetlands. But not all of the pollutants, especially dissolved phosphorus, we call it, which is a very large concern from fertilizers and those sorts of things. But a lot of them are being eliminated because they cause those algae blooms. And retention basins like this are very good at taking up that dissolved phosphorus and using it to feed themselves. So I'm not saying that's where we're going to end up, but the treatment train, as we know, is going to be extremely important in this case, and it's something that we're considering. It's not something you always see in New England, because the earth usually will accept water, but in cases where you have high clay contents, it may be a better option. So,
thank you.
So can I summarize kind of where I am on the idea, just briefly?
Go ahead.
Okay. I'm sympathetic to the minor encroachment, but what I think, if you can sell Richard, you can sell me on the stormwater issue.
You could give me a lower hurdle, huh?
But I share his concern, and especially I would be looking for some form of stress analysis for periodic rain events and so forth. Really important to be able to prove to the public that this huge area of impervious surface is not going to affect the water quality of Durham. So I think that in your studies, your third-party studies, I think you're going to want, really affirmative, clear, transparent as the public wants, assurances that that is the case and why. And it should be laid out in a way that the public can understand based on what we've heard tonight, you know. And I think that there should be a clear discussion of the pedestrian and bicycling conflicts resulting from the traffics and any traffic study, third-party traffic study you present, and that those should be sort of calibrated so that they deal not just with the best case of a certain assumption about the leasing outcomes following the lease up of the property, but that present scenarios based on the full range of flexibility for which you've designed the property so that all of the potential tenancies and the expected traffic loads and truck loads and so forth are laid out. I mean, I understand all of these are trade-offs. I mean, you know, the commercial real estate is trade-offs. But I think that should be very clearly disclosed under all the potential future scenarios.
Thank you.
Mr. Barron, is there anything you'd like to add?
No.
Nope. All right.
We're going to see you this summer, or is it going to be in the fall? Any timetable on that?
After this, I don't know. No.
Oh, we didn't mean to scare you.
No, I'm just teasing. I have, you know, before I really went out and engaged all of my consultants, I wanted to make sure I had your feedback first, and so I can communicate that and properly scope this. So we are speaking to a number of them. Obviously, I have some work to do with Gove, which I wasn't, you know, we have a report, but to do a little bit more investigation is something I'll have to scope with them. So it's going to depend on their schedules, probably more than mine. I would hope to be back, I think, by the fall, if I had to guess.
And our best guess as to when we're going to have the wetland, shoreland overlay district implemented?
Well, the date that
Ballpark it. Is it this summer or is it this fall?
well, what
Late
counts is
summer,
when a
fall.
public
Late
hearing-
summer, early fall.
What counts is when a public hearing for a new ordinance versus public hearing for a new application, whichever public hearing goes first, they win, and the ordinance wins in case of a tie. So it's just for the public hearing, not when it's adopted.
And you're aware of what's the language in that?
I'm not sure, well, I doubt it's hit a form where it would have come to his attention yet.
Okay.
I can share, I told Mr. Smith that it is impending and the buffers are larger, but I'll send you a copy if I didn't already.
If it's different than what's available online, I read through what's available online, but I'm aware, I think it's moving from 75 to 100 currently. As I understand, we're not part of wetlands, but, you know, I think the shoreland, if I recall, your shoreland is a little different than the state's definition, but we're beyond both of them, so. And, you know, I should mention too, more for the public's benefit, I think, you know, one of those reports from the concerned citizen talked about endangered species and habitat and things like that. And obviously this will be going through AOT, alteration of terrain, at the state level, and part of that is review with Fish and Game, the Fish and Game Department. So I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that we'll be looking into that as well. And Gove will be able to support us in that. They have a whole wildlife division over there as well. So.
And just go ahead. Go ahead. This is more of a process question, and I'm not sure. The presentation and your deck was excellent. Will that be shared with the town, and will that be available publicly on the website? Only because it was a terrific presentation. I think it would be nice to have that content. I don't know if it's in a format that could be shared externally. But it's an ask. You know, I've heard multiple times that it would be nice to have more information shared, so I've just...
Well, I think this is, most certainly this is a public meeting, so what I presented should be available to the public, in my opinion, and I've sent
you sent
Michael
me the
presentation.
PowerPoint.
Yeah, so...
And we can just upload that.
Yeah, that's fine if you guys want to put it on whatever planning or website. I think I'm happy with that, that's fine.
I think it'd be helpful. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, just as long as we're all aware that this could change quite a bit, and, you know,
It's
I know it's a
conceptual.
beautiful presentation, but don't fall in love with it yet.
Yeah.
Especially with Mr. Kelly.
Again, go easy on me, please.
And just briefly, how do you see the interplay of this project and your leasing strategy with the potential development of the edge and a planned unit development nearby?
Well, my understanding is the edge is focused quite a bit more on R&D, some housing, some office, sort of more like a mixed-use, vibrant sort of district. I mean, we'll create some wonderful...
Light industrial permitted, though, right? Yeah, okay.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that, too. Yeah.
Curious, you don't view it as a direct competition in most respects?
To this particular, no, not in most respects, no. This is very different from what they're doing down there. And in fact, you know, I mean, we did explore housing here for a little bit too. You know, we understood that Durham had a need, and we said, can we make it work? Is there a way we can make it work? And unfortunately, just it wasn't a viable location. So this is where we came back.
We're done? All right. Counselor Lund, did you have anything?
Nothing that
Very good.
somebody else hasn't mentioned.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Smith.
Thank you. Very, very good conversation. I appreciate you guys very much. And gals, I should say. All inclusive.
Gals.
All right. Item 9, lodging house, this will be a public hearing, lodging house zoning ordinance. Proposed change adding lodging house as a new use and eliminating student rental as a use. And I do want to make a comment. The recommended action for tonight was to vote to initiate the amendment if acceptable. I do not plan on going that far tonight.
I don't think so.
All right, there is some very pending legislation that will probably go either up or down in the next couple of weeks that I'd like to know how that goes before we make a final call on this. But that wouldn't stop us from trying to decide what we'd like the final version of this to look like. Well, Mr. Chair, it would be, I could give just a little bit of an introduction to give people some orientation to the
Please.
proposal. I think a lot of people, when they see lodging house, rightfully, we're concerned. We think of a lodging house, rooming house, boarding house as, you know, the old place where you've got 15 single men, a single room occupancy that usually you find in a downtown city. And that's not really what's envisioned here. I think the impetus for this is that the town had the 3 unrelated rule, and that was removed, as you know, due to large degree concerns about what was happening in Concord. And then the town developed an alternative as a way to try to regulate essentially single-family houses with unrelated and student occupancy, but also multifamily, but mainly single-family in the neighborhoods. And a number of people developed the idea that was adopted regarding student rental. And we are gathering that in Concord, it's very likely that they're going to pass a law soon prohibiting discrimination. I don't think it's discriminate, but discrimination based on student status. So then the town is faced with, well, if our 3 unrelated is not going to work because of Concord, and now the student rental's not going to work, what strategies do we have to try to manage occupancy in single-family houses in the neighborhoods, student housing, and a large number of unrelated? And I think through a number of conversations, including with the fire marshal and our code officer and other people with Todd Selig's ad hoc group, was realizing that the state's approach through the lodging house could be a promising way to regulate single-family situations when our 3 unrelated and our student rental seem to be pulled away from us. And lodging house, I think, is a little bit misleading term, because in the fire code, it defines a 1 and 2 family dwelling unit, which is different from how we define it in our ordinance. And it's a building that contains 1 or 2 dwelling units occupied by members of a single family with not more than 3 outsiders in rented rooms. And the fire code does not define family and does not define outsiders, but in some ways that kind of gets at what we were doing before, and there's no indication the state's going to throw out the fire code. And then a lodging house is the next thing beyond that. So my understanding is that a lodging house would therefore be something with, it may have a family, could even be just one person, and it would have 4 or more outsiders. So in some ways, it's what we've tried to get at with the student rental ordinance and the 3 unrelated, but hopefully it's a way that we can do it just by grafting onto the fire code already, which is in place. So that's the idea of it, and therefore we're defining a lodging house that we should be able to legitimately do by this reference to the fire code. It's getting at what we're trying to do with single-family houses, and then we zone it for the appropriate zones. So that's the background.
Michael, that was always my understanding, and we've had these discussions, we've had this background before. What, though, is the impetus to allow the lodging house as a permitted use in the rural and resident C, so that, in other words, the description of what we're doing on the agenda suggests that all we're doing, all that's proposed, is the change in the definition. But the actual document we have in front of us that the public is responding to changes the table of uses so that this use would be permitted in the rural and resident C districts when it was not permitted before. And I was wondering if there's an advocacy position for that I could hear synthesized.
Absolutely. Right now, based on this definition, Durham has 2 lodging houses. One is an RC, one is an R. Friends Forever over on Route 4 would be a lodging house. Okay? And there's a battered women's shelter in town, which is in the rural zone. And both of those would qualify as this sort of communal living type lodging house.
But this change would be forward-looking and would allow as a permitted use future lodging houses, which student housing might meet the definition of, and therefore introducing a type of density in those residential neighborhoods that the community is responding to in these letters and saying, is this really what you want? And I don't understand. I'd like to hear if that's what someone is advocating, that developments meeting the definition of lodging house, which might have been previously defined as student housing, are now going to be allowed in the R district when they weren't before. I would need to hear someone explain to me why that should be the case. Not just that these other 2 properties need variances. That existing properties need variances maybe, but what's the advocacy position for, and harmonized with the master plan, for putting lodging houses in R and in residential C? I haven't heard that. I've never heard that in our previous discussions.
We did discuss, there was more to it than, there was also the discussion about those particular areas not really being attractive for student rentals because they're out of town, and more students prefer to be closer to town. So the conversation in the group also was about the nature that it's outside of the city center, therefore it would be less attractive to students and more attractive to those types of more, basic, non-student adult
living.
lodging.
Right, I understand that, but why?
Those are the two, that was really the conversation that we had about it.
Okay.
And just a point of clarification, because Gary, I heard you say that, those two parcels would have to get a variance, but I don't think they would.
Don't have to, no.
It's an existing.
It's an existing.
It's an existing use that became or becomes non-conforming.
So they would be historically exempted.
Exactly.
There,
Now,
yeah.
if they ceased operation for,
yeah.
what is it, a year? Then they would lose that usage, right? And then would have to get the
Right,
variance.
So I guess that goes to my point, and your point, Sally. I take your point that this would be less attractive, and it's perhaps not likely that lodging houses marketed to students would be developed in those areas, but I still don't know why included in the definitional change, the chart of permitted uses was changed, other than,
Versus a student rental one. So whereas the student rental is all X'd out, that there's a P where there was an X and another P where there was an X.
they weren't permitted before, though. But they would, but
Well,
these...
they weren't permitted at all before lodging.
Right, but they would be, but lodging houses would be permitted.
Right.
And I'm wanting to know why. If the existing properties that were advanced as the reason, I'm wanting to, it doesn't seem to me to make sense in terms of the master plan, is what
Well-
I'm saying. The big picture is, we're trying to put, we just went through the idea of what the downtown's going to look like and what professional office is going to look like. And I don't know why Beth Olshansky and others are not 100% right when they raise their concern about the potential for uses in R, which is really developed not much different than other residential areas. Why would we want to make possible through the change the development of lodging, of effectively dense uses that aren't the dense uses that further the purposes of what Paul was talking about last week, where he's talking about creating soft density in those, in that rural area, soft density, with more duplexes and stuff that encourage home ownership, but on smaller footprints that don't change the overall character, that kind of idea. That's what I mean, if I envision what I think that we're trying to make happen and what's consistent with the master plan, it's the professional office going to have the multifamily and, the student housing and so forth. We want to have more density, but the right kind of density in the rural area, like Paul was talking about, with carefully developed stuff that doesn't change the overall, rural character, but gets to a more attainable level with smaller homes and stuff. I just don't see how making it possible to develop effectively a student rental in the rural district is in any way consistent with what anything else we're doing.
We can debate that later. Okay? I mean, it's a good point, right? It's worth discussion, but that's the type of deliberation we should probably have after the public hearing.
Yeah.
I was thinking the same. I was wondering if we could potentially open it up for some public comments, and then we could reflect on that maybe after, and a deliberation would be
Yeah.
helpful for me.
All right?
Okay, but there's no, but the reason for it, the reason, I want to hear that. I mean, I want to...
Well, what you want to explain is...
I already told you, the primary reason for it was to not create exclusionary zoning scenarios.
It's this,
because of the existing uses.
But that's,
Okay?
That's
So
the
that
definition.
is it. That is it. If you're looking for anything more, it's not there.
it's very complicated with the loss of the 3 unrelated. And it all comes down to what we used to have as 3 unrelated. We had a little
All
thing
right.
that worked very well, but with the
Okay.
loss of that,
So-
it changed a lot. So it's
And we
trying
can
to
get into
figure
it in
out.
more detail after the
Yeah,
public hearing.
Yeah.
All right?
It's a completely separate and different thing.
I'll-
We'll have to discuss it
I'll move that
more.
we open the public hearing.
A second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
It's a roll call, right?
No.
No, he's a non-voting.
He's non-voting, so we don't have to do a roll call.
Yay.
Yay. All right. Who would like to speak first?
Good evening. Malcolm Sandberg, 15 Langley Road. Thank you for your service and patience going through long meetings such as this. And thank you for the introduction to this particular hearing, which I think should be a regular practice when we have public hearings, so that when we get up to speak, we know basically what you're understanding what it is you're trying to have clarified and responded to. So when I read the draft ordinance last week, I was taken aback by 2 things. One is of course, in the definition that you've put forward for the lodging house, rooming house, that it was going to be for 16 or fewer people. And then at the very end, it said that this is because of the fire marshal, or the state ordinance for a statute for the fire code. And I thought, well, that's odd. Over all the years that we've had a zoning ordinance, I don't remember ever having to set up a rationale for a number of such as 16 based on the fire code. We always follow the fire code. But just to check, I did go back and I looked at the a definition of a boarding house in the ordinance, and the current definition says that a boarding house is an owner-occupied residential building principally used, designed, and adapted to provide living accommodations for not more than 10 occupants and having common cooking and dining facilities. What's wrong with that? We've had 10. Why do we move it to 16? This language that we're adopting here is saying, by right, it can be 16. And I don't think that should be the basis for the boards making a decision, or the town making the decision, that because it can be done at 16, it should be done. It's not necessarily in the best interest of the community to have it 16 rather than 10. I looked up other definitions, though. We have short-term rentals, and there's no mention of the fire code there. Short-term rentals in owner-occupied single-family residences. I looked up hotels, no mention of the fire code there, but of course hotels follow the fire code. Hotels are permitted in the commercial core. I looked up inns. Inns are permitted in the R and the RC zone, and also in the commercial zones as adaptive reuse. Now, I did ask myself, well, why do we have inns or commercial businesses such as that in the R and the RC zone, which I think is part of the question that's before the group now. And I don't think it makes an awful lot of sense. But although we do have a lovely, at least one lovely inn that is an adaptive reuse. And having an adaptive reuse in the rural zone may make sense. And we may want to reconsider whether or not we want to have just a P straightforward in the R and the RC zone for inns. So that's a change that I'd like the board to consider. Grandfather or grandmother, the existing such similar structures. Another interesting thing is that the inn is a commercial operation within an owner-occupied property containing, in addition to living accommodations for the owner and the family, 4 to 6 guest rooms. Well, let's see, 6 guest rooms, maybe 2 people in the room, there's 12, and maybe a family of 4. Wow, you got 16. Well, there you get your 16, but it doesn't have to be 16. Another place for discussion about what should be allowed and what shouldn't. A lodging house, as we're proposing here, would be a commercial operation. It's not like the kids have left and I've got 3 extra bedrooms and I'd like to make a little extra cash and maybe I could have a boarding house and rent some rooms out. I think that's permitted, but it's a commercial operation. Well, there's another gray area there about, can I have a commercial operation in the R and RC zone if it's owner-occupied? If it's not owner-occupied, it's just strictly a straight business. If we're having a lodging house under this definition, it seems to me that it ought to be in a commercial zone. A lodging house, as proposed to be allowed, will basically be a dormitory for up to 16 people with a shared kitchen, or maybe not a kitchen. And each person likely having a car and the need for parking, and then having to drive to town for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, or work your way through everybody else using your kitchen. Unstructured, unsupervised, kind of I think a formula for trouble. And that if we're going to be having this sort of enterprise, we ought to have some requirements for, let's say, a tenant or an owner-occupied structure, or at least a responsible person, an accountable person, to be in charge of making sure that everything is run smoothly within the building. So, to my mind, a lodging house would be best sited in or near the center of town, within walking distance of work, services, provisions, entertainment, transportation, and so on. People who are wanting to live in a lodging house are going to want to and perhaps need to be in the center of town where they can have access to things quite readily, rather than having them drive miles in and out of town for 3 meals a day. As for other lodging opportunities in Durham, the town authorizes accessory dwelling units in either detached or undetached structures. The town permits mixed residential use. In the central business district, we can have stores and offices on the ground floor, and we can have mixed residential on the upper floors. The town allows for residential complexes to be developed with buildings of 3 or more dwelling units. Another issue is whether or not we're going to have dwelling units. We've even gone so far as to have an attainable housing overlay district. Now, I don't understand the attainable housing overlay district very much, but I do know that a municipality cannot control the economy. They can't make things more affordable, other than to manage the town's own finances and the taxes that they ask us to pay. A municipality can provide opportunities. And the municipality can make opportunities for others to capitalize on, as in the business community. Durham has done that, created through the zoning ordinance a wealth of opportunities for business enterprises. We citizens should not be feeling guilty or any waves of doubt about that. Nor should we be feeling any guilt about a perceived need to do more. The markets shift. The market is shifting. Enrollments at UNH are going down. The university will be requiring students to live on campus. The demand for housing is shifting. Opportunities for lodging will be changing and probably increasing. My recommendation, boarding, lodging, or rooming houses should be limited to the core section of town. There should be required on-site responsible management, and the town should continue the use of its current definition of the boarding house and require owner-occupied or closely supervised and managed for the protection of the town. In no case should it be in the R or the RC zone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you
Mr.
again
Barron?
for your service.
I have one question, because is a lodging house a commercial or a residential use?
We don't define it in zoning. Oh, well, no, I'm sorry. I mean, it would fall under the residential uses in the table. Yeah,
It's in the residential.
it's under residential uses, yeah.
Excuse me, are you suggesting that if I were to build a structure out there and say I'm living in California or a corporation, and I build a structure there for 16 unrelated people with a single kitchen, that I wouldn't be operating a business? Is that what I'm gathering you're saying?
Well, it may well be a business, but
That
in our
wouldn't be-
table of uses, it would fall under the residential
All
category.
right, well, we need to consider that question. Thank
Well,
you.
yeah. It's. We don't have it.
I think, just a point of clarification, that in commercial real estate, we refer to residential properties all the time that are income producing.
Yes, they're rental.
All right. Is there anyone in Zoom who'd like to speak?
I don't see any. No hands up.
Well, what was that?
Doesn't look like it.
Thank you.
No hands up.
When you're ready, Beth.
Waiting for my PowerPoint to come up, thank you. No, well, I had it up waiting all evening and now it just blinked out on me.
Disappeared.
Somewhere on the bottom there.
Does someone want to go while I'm come up?
Good evening. My name is Diane McCann and I live...
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
My name is Diane McCann and I live at 27 Oyster River Road. Just as an introduction to me, I just want to say that I've lived here as long as Anne Marie, or perhaps a little bit longer, since 1970. And the various epic times and hard changes that we've faced with changes of university regimes, planning documents with unmet goals or revised objectives, that we residents have endured, including budget growths, reevaluations, and especially types of costly parking meter methods and strategies have been hard for us citizens to deal with over time. Now we come to this new situation where we're trying to deal with ages and stages of Durham's growth and shaky development. We're at a time of critical needs requiring thoughtful, researched approaches and inclusive ideas suitable for our town that meet the needs of the entire community. I think we've missed out on that by not having enough forums for the participants in the town to hear what's happening with this situation. At least I've followed this as well as I could, given the country's difficulties, and I find it quite confusing and difficult to follow. So I really think we need some sort of summary forum before the counselors decide on this particular change. The reason I'm actually here, besides my own concerns, is that I have a letter here to read from Carden Welsh. Cardin lives at 3 Fairchild Drive, and I think you all know him from his past work on the council. Hi all, thank you for the time and effort that you spend considering changes to our zoning. One issue I'd like to raise for consideration is the proposal to add lodging houses by right in the rural and residency districts. In my years on the town council and the planning board, I always tried to ensure that any changes would be consistent with, 1, the purpose of the zone laid out in our zoning ordinance, and 2, the principles of smart growth, which underlie our master plan. I don't see how this proposal is consistent with either of these two fundamental underpinnings of our planning. The purpose of the rural district is, quote, to preserve the rural character of the areas of Durham that have historically been rural, that are low density, and that are not served or intended to be served by public water and public sewage. In this district, customary rural land uses will be preserved, and all development will be carried out with the objective of preserving the natural and scenic environment of the district. Residential development will be limited to housing that is designed so that the character of the district is maintained, the scenic quality is protected, and a significant amount of open space is permanently preserved. That's within our bylaws here. The purpose of the residence coastal district is, quote, to protect the water quality of the community's principal surface waters and to preserve the rural character and scenic beauty of these coastal areas, including the view of the shore as seen from the water. In this district, all development will be carried out in a manner that preserves the natural and scenic environment of the district. Residential development will be limited to housing that is designed so that the character of the district is maintained, the scenic quality of the coastal area is protected, and a significant amount of open space is permanently preserved. In terms of smart growth, that's a close quote there, in terms of smart growth, the addition of lodging houses by right in either of these districts seems to violate several key principles that should drive our growth. Reduce sprawl to reduce car usage and transportation needs. Create walkable neighborhoods, foster a walkable and bikeable environment. Preserve open spaces. District development towards existing services and jobs. Given the two incompatibilities I laid out above, I would ask that you reconsider the proposal. Thanks again for your thoughtful time and effort in this manner. Best, Cardin Welsh. As I said, 3 Fairchild Drive, Durham. I guess I'd also like to add that while I'm concerned about living spaces for workers, I'm most concerned about the downtown lack of care, concern, explanation, investigation of what is happening with all these empty spaces in our business district. I don't know who's in charge to take care of this or work on it, but I think the town deserves some kind of response from some person to explain why these things are happening, what can we do to improve the situation, because I think that's paramount for development of any housing. Thanks.
Are you ready?
I am. I hope I am. I know at least one person read my letter. Thank you. And I don't want to repeat. I did, okay. So I don't want to repeat. I was going to come up here and ask the why question, which kindly Michael and then Paul explained a little bit more about the thinking behind why we ended up with lodging houses permitted in R and R. Still is confusing to me. One thing I'm thinking about, it started with, we had the student rental definition, and then we realized that wasn't going to work because of what's being discussed in Concord, right? We've worked so hard over the years to try to keep the numbers of students in neighborhoods down to a reasonable number, manageable number, for the obvious reasons that there's been a bit of disruption. So now we're going from, okay, take out the definition of student rental, which I think was going to be now up to 4 or 5, I can't remember, whatever it was, now to 16. it sounds extreme. I mean, I don't see how the two, why all of a sudden, we only wanted 3 unrelated, now we're saying, okay, 16 unrelated is great. And I know it doesn't have to be students, and that's fine too, and calling a lodging house maybe moves us into a different concept that's not just students, though it could be students and maybe doesn't matter. But so that's a question I have. And it does tie into thinking about neighborhoods. And my understanding about why we're not putting lodging houses in RA and RB is because I heard referred to tonight because of the neighborhoods, and those neighborhoods being more tightly zoned. So some of you saw this, and I'm also showing this for the public who hasn't seen it. I just did a little investigation looking at RB, which is generally zoned for 1 acre. RA is generally a little less than a half acre. RB, generally an acre. And so this is, you know, one of our popular family neighborhoods. Well, a couple of them, Hemlock Way and then the Woodridge neighborhood. And I did all the math, added up all the acres, divided by whatever to get the averages. And so in the RB zone, in these 2 neighborhoods, 1.28 acres per lot. So those houses, you know, they're pretty close together, and you can see how putting 16 people in a lodging house in a neighborhood, family neighborhood, could potentially be disruptive. So then let's look at some rural. So more further away from town, the Carriageway neighborhood is 1.44, even though in rural we're zoned for 3.3 acres. And everyone thinks, oh, those people in rural, they got so much land and we really need to, like, it's too much. But okay, Carriageway, 1.4 acres average. Griffith, 1.08 acres, less than the RB even, and then Surrey Lane, 1.4 acres. And then going down toward my neck of the woods, we have Falls Way, 1.96. So those lots are a little bigger, but I just wanted to point out how narrow they are. These houses are closer together than the houses in Woodridge, where you think a lodging house wouldn't be appropriate because it might be disruptive to families. So it's something I hope the planning board will think about. Or our newest neighborhood in Durham, which is about 20 years old, and the result of a conservation subdivision, and that's Stonewall Way. The average lot size is 1.58. So we're not looking at these expansive house lots. And there are a lot of neighborhoods in the rural zone that I'm familiar with where the houses are pretty close together. And then this was not in my letter. I went on to explore RC, which, you know, I think about RC, lovely Durham Point Road, and more spread out. But then there's also RC, which is Morgan Way, Williams Way, Terrell Place. And the average lot size is 0.96 acres in RC, smaller than RB. Okay, so I don't think it makes sense to make a judgment call based on a vision that R and RC are more spacious, because the neighborhoods are really clustered together. So that's an important consideration. You wouldn't put a 16-person lodging house in the RB zone for obvious reasons, and I'm saying that thinking should be also continued to think about RC and R, which have many, many clustered little neighborhoods. So that is one thought. And then the other piece being, you know, we've worked so hard to think about climate change, reducing our emissions, having our density closer to town, all in the master plan, our smart growth. So why are we thinking about a lodging house out in the Netherlands of R and RC, where people are going to be having to drive into town if they have cars, or perhaps they're going to have to find some other way to get into town because they are going to need food. So it's puzzling. The other thing I didn't mention, I did mention my disastrous experience renting a room in a fraternity house. Yes. It really was scary. It wasn't funny. And yeah. But the next year, after I graduated from college, I loved Durham so much, I came back up here. And I went to the Durham laundromat, and there was a little index card that said, rooms for rent in a farmhouse, $10 a week. And I thought, this is 55 years ago. I thought, okay, that's for me, because I don't have a lot of money. I love New Hampshire, and I wanted to be a craftsperson. I need a cheap place to live. And of course, I didn't have a car, so I hitchhiked out there. Not a good idea.
It was the 70s, Beth.
So this was a large Victorian house where rooms were being rented. There were about 12 bedrooms, and there were about 16 people, ranging from the ages of 16 to 30 probably. Some of them were blue-collar workers. Many of them weren't working. It was very transient, as you might imagine. There was a lot of drugs. The owner-occupied person, I thought it had that going for it, but actually, when he was there, he spent most of his time hitting on the women that were there, so that wasn't very cool. There were people dealing drugs there. Someone get held up at knife point. I mean, this is scary stuff, and it's not the kind of place you would want your kids to live at. I'm thinking about Sally and Heather, who have mentioned that they love their kids to find a nice place in Durham to live that's affordable. Robin Mower had written a letter, and I know it got sent in late, so I don't know if you saw it, but looking into lodging houses in other college communities, and there was serious licensing going on there, and rules and regulations and management requirements. I mean, of course, when I hear, shelter for women, a women's shelter, wonderful. But what happens if that lodging house is available for women who need shelter, temporary shelter, but there's also, some crazy guys in there who are all on drugs. It's like we can look at this with rose-colored glasses, and we want to find the missing middle and be open to people who are in transition and all that, but we also need to create safe spaces both within our lodging houses and within the greater community. So I would plead with you to think about, if we feel we need to have lodging houses, I think they should be either close to the center of town or on public transportation. They need to be not in family neighborhoods, and they need to have some licensing and management requirements, because let's not create something that we all are going to end up feeling badly about. Thank you.
Can I just ask some questions?
Sure.
So before your presentation, I went in, maybe waved one way, and then as you went through it, I sort of started leaning another. And as you reflect back on your early days, it sounds like there was a housing issue back then as well, because you started in a fraternity, and then you had to look at a wall, and then you ended up in a rural area in something that was uncomfortable. So I'm not going to, but I would say that the housing issue has been around for a long time, and it's reflected in your comments. I don't know if that's fair or not.
I think my choices of housing had to do with naivete. And I don't think there was a housing shortage. It was like, what does someone do when they're just starting out and they don't have a lot of money? They look
That's
for
exactly
cheap
the point,
places
isn't it?
to
That's
live.
exactly the point. What does someone do when they're starting out and they don't have a lot of money?
Yeah,
I
you
agree.
want to make sure that you have safe places for them. If we're a community that wants to create those spaces, let's make sure they're for the health, safety, and welfare of everybody, the tenants who are living there and the community. Thank you.
And then just one more comment, and it's not directed at you per se. The indication that someone's only been here 25 years, and therefore they don't have standing to make comments about housing, was offensive. And so, that's correct. That's the idea that I'm excluded because I've only been here 25 years is upsetting. And sometimes I think that not personality, but that opinion permeates other areas, and it's not pleasant. And it's exclusionary, and sometimes that exclusionary practice finds its way into ordinances. And so when I've been thinking about this, it got in the back of my head, and then I've said, for a student that has no power, they feel exactly the way you did. They couldn't afford it. For someone that's been here 25 years to be talked down to and said, I don't have standing to help make decisions, that's offensive. It's exclusionary, and it's not right. And that's what I'll say about that.
That was not directed at me, correct?
No. It was not.
Thank
But, I can put two and two together, and I understand the constraints, and I understand the problem you faced, and I think that problem is still faced by students today, and I think it's also faced by people that want to move in here and can't afford it, and then other people are telling them they're not welcome. And I felt that personally. Thank you.
Can I just add an addendum, not related to what your comment is, but Todd had sent some newsletter about a co-housing, an innovative co-housing concept being developed in Portsmouth. And the idea was small bedrooms and then a small shared space. And I thought, oh, well, and the idea was for it to be more inclusive, more affordable, and all that for people in Portsmouth. I thought, oh, well, Durham has that, but it's called student rental, and the only difference is it's not inexpensive, it's hugely expensive because, we're taking advantage of a captive audience, but that's a problem.
Like
Some would
micro
say
apartments.
it's because of supply and demand.
And supply and demand. And the cost to build.
I mean, markets are very efficient. There's a reason it's expensive. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, as I had indicated to you earlier, I have a bit of a family issue,
Yep.
so I need to excuse
ahead.
myself. Thank you.
Anybody new before we bring them in?
All right. Next.
Well, somebody who hasn't gone yet.
Diane, let's let the folks who haven't.
I don't.
Microphone.
I appreciate your sentiment, sir. I don't think that was the intention, but I can't speak for Ann. But in my experience here, I think there has to be a balance of what is available for students and what is available for the rest of us who are here. People who are faculty, people who are working people. And what the point of this is supposed to be providing some kind of housing available for the working population. I didn't think we were so concerned about students. I thought we were trying to find the working person a place. Isn't that what this is about?
Yes.
Not at all. I mean, if you heard the
Everybody has it.
introduction, it was quite contrary to that. This was
For lodging.
specifically about three unrelated, I believe, correct?
So we're not concerned anymore about this, the working people?
Oh, no, this is tonight's agenda item.
On
What you
this
should be
particular-
speaking to would be the lodging that came about because of three unrelated getting tossed.
The lodging house
Completely different.
could be worked either way, right? It could be,
Yeah.
anybody could move in there,
Exactly.
right? The issue we're looking at is that we would be potentially losing any control over where students could live. So this is being presented as a way to provide some
A solution?
control. I wouldn't call it a full solution, but it would be this, potentially this or nothing.
It's difficult to find the perfect solution. We have to work within certain confines of,
Oh, I
of the
understand
law.
that,
So
of course.
this is the best.
But we don't even know what the law is. That's the problem.
Well, we know
You
what's
know,
coming.
But we don't know for sure.
That's
And to
accurate.
create an ordinance to satisfy an unknown is not sensible.
We'll know,
Valid.
though, by the time, we're considering it now, but we'll know by the time we're
we'll have a-
just initiating the process, right?
We're working on it now so that we can minimize the period of time when we would have nothing.
But your recommendation is going to be reflective of perhaps not
By the end of
way-
this month, we will know what it is.
I don't know if you have so much faith in the legislature.
Well,
but I don't.
No,
It will
it's currently in
Committee.
in the combined committee, yeah. It's
And-
past one house, it's in, and it's being, and we will know by the end of the month whether or not it passes. And then what it is, and if it does pass, what it is we'd be able to do. Until it passes, there's no sense in us bringing this to the lawyer. I'd like to have a draft ready to bring to the lawyer as soon as the bill passes, so that it can be reviewed for its legality, and then brought back and submitted to the town council, or fixed. But waiting until that point to start from scratch, that's not something the town administrator wanted us to do. Because of how long it takes. Because you think about that entire space of time when we would have nothing because it's been made illegal by the state,
months.
that anybody could come in and start something and we wouldn't be able to stop it.
They could pour in
So we're
anywhere.
also looking, so we have the three unrelated went to
Yeah, so-
however unrelated, and then we have large student complexes. And what we're looking to try and manage is that middle section where we can control rentals, where it does bring more in for possibilities beyond student
students.
housing, but is in that range of that 5 to 16. And after that, it's dormitories and multi-unit apartments.
Or
I mean, so-
fraternities or whatever, yeah.
But, so this is a middle section we don't cover right now.
This was a section that the town council pointed out to us earlier, actually, when we passed the student rental, that we kind of covered everything up to 5 and things that are higher than 16, but we didn't cover anything in between. So this is trying to, this started as trying to fill that gap, but now with what's happening in Concord, it's quickly changing into possibly the only thing we might have. And I know Matt still wants to speak, so if we satisfied your question, I'd like Matt to be able to speak.
Of course.
And
Thank you.
we do have a member, or we did have a member of the state legislature in this group that Al Howland was part of this
I know
group.
that.
So we're getting firsthand knowledge about what was happening. It's very complicated.
Joshua Meyer with 7 Chesley Drive. I haven't been here that much longer than Peyton, but the more relevant factors, I'm just back from Mexico. So if you see me run out of the room, it's not because of anything. So I watched since the minutes are not yet up, I watched the parts of the planning board workshop of May 28th. and you had only about 22 minutes of discussion about this lodging house, and then some nice new baby cooing interaction during the recess. But notably, not a single point raised in the letters that are posted or in what Mal Sandberg raised tonight came up during your discussion. And so this gets back to a theme you've heard me say before about the process and the procedure. And I think that's actually what Anne Marie was addressing, not so much as a issue of standing, but of the Durham tradition of engagement and community. And also, I just want to make sure, because some people misunderstand this, when I talk about the public not being fully involved, it's not a critique of you guys on the board. I mean, you could all be 9 Albert Einsteins, and it would still be the issue of Durham's tradition of having things developed through workshops and engagement and so forth. So I've never questioned the intentions of anybody. Obviously, your intentions have always seemed to me to be very honorable and in the interest of the best Durham to be. But it's a question of procedure and, complicated by the whole legislature issue that Paul had mentioned here many times before, but of scrambling to make changes that my concerns undo things that were in place because of wide community input, without seeing that the public is fully informed and strongly encouraged to engage. So, I mean, you've heard so many people say that today as well. So it to me, that violates the Durham tradition, even if it's technically legal. And also, these are the same points I made in advance of the undoing the 3 unrelated rule in the letter that's posted for me from December 18th, 2024, based on my council comment, and to do that, and that led Todd, I think, to post the details of that push in Friday updates. I encouraged Michael successfully to post the details of that on the planning board site. But it's ironic that push and all the questions I raised about the ambiguity, turned out to be, well, that was a big push and we got it through, and then now it's, as Paul said at the workshop, well, that's not going to work. And also, as Paul bluntly mentioned at the workshop, Concord is watching us, and so we have to be careful what we say. What's implicit in that, but not explicitly said, but was said to me yesterday explicitly by a libertarian activist in town who finds it so amusing that you guys, or we guys, I would say, we're trying to, preempt what's going on in Concord. And he said, well, the public may not be following what's going on, but we're queuing in the legislators at Concord. So every time you guys make some attempt to undo what we're doing, we just change what we're doing in Concord to undo what you're doing. And so the things that we're now trying to adapt to preempt, are things that were caused by the prior attempts to preempt what was going on in Concord. It's a cat and mouse game. And, really when I talked early on about the ambiguity of what would happen if we just sort of waited to see, and I understand the constraints of time that Paul mentions, but it's a conundrum in both ways, in that we're actually, I feel we're trying to work together, that we are, creating some of the additional problems that we're trying to preempt. So, that's a concern. So you have that kind of reciprocal changes that dig us deeper into things, how we got to where we are. Also, and I think this was related to both Matt's and Anne Marie's comment, an issue of authority versus power. And I recall planning board chairs of old, such as Neil Wiley, alerting planning board members to the point that the planning board, even if they sort of had technically the power, even if they had good intentions, didn't really have the authority to override a decision made by a large group of citizens. He said, well, technically, if there was something that was even decided in town meetings that don't exist anymore, you can't just vote them out of existence because they were decided by the community at large. And so now you have to have a ballot initiative or referendum. You can't just say, well, we don't agree with that anymore. These were consensus decisions made with broad citizen engagement. And I think, the same thing with the master plan clauses quoted by Cardin Welsh. Those came out of a whole other process. And so no matter how many years you've been here, it's not simply, or should not be, I would argue, you can dispute it, an issue of, well, we have the power to overdo that. Also, I'm very concerned about the bare minimums that are being met to notify people. Well, we have a notice up on the town hall, so we've met the legal minimum, and the public should, be coming to town hall and look at the notices. And Michael has told people, well, he forgot to give Todd the write-ups for the Friday updates. I mean, I think it's not okay. It may be legally passing, but it doesn't, and again, it meets the power requirements, but not really the authority that, or maybe as Matt would put it, that gets the trust and an understanding of the public. And, the public may come to the same idea that this is screwed up with the legislature. We don't have a lot of control, and we're the same scrambling that you're doing would be the same thing. I mean, I don't know personally what I would do that would be better, but that's not the issue. It's that it's not up to me, and I'm not sure it's only up to the people who have volunteered to be on various boards to decide this outside of the context of community involvement. And also, in terms of things that are technically public, I'm just back from a conference in Mexico with a plenary session on a book I wrote 40 years ago, 40th anniversary. One of the issues I discussed in there, among many others, is that difference between things that are technically public, but are rarely, no one knows about them, no one goes to see it. So you can claim it's public, but it's really what I call private public, versus things that are public, where they're broadcast, people are notified about them, they're informed about them, they're encouraged to engage in it. So the public is a complicated term. And also, again, I know it's widely violated, but it is a violation of the RSA not to have the minutes up within 5 days. And I think the public would be more informed about this public hearing if the notes from the workshop, and if that was generally adhered to. So I agree very much with Gary Whittington's raising the question about the difference between pre-existing lodging houses like the Friends Forever International, whatever it's called, and the women's shelter, and then saying, well, we can use that general label because, again, it gets at the issue of the different meanings within the same label, and allowing it in these rural zones, which is, I think Beth presents very compelling information about the lots not being these abundant large lots where you could have the type of behavior she described, experiences, and wouldn't affect the people all around there. So I think this is problematic in the way it's proceeding, and I understand the constraints you're operating under, but I still think that it's an issue of the public. I don't think the procedure has been as pure as it ought to be in a town where people care and want to know what's going on and want to have faith in the people making decisions. And they may come to exactly the same decisions, they may realize the same conundrum. But if you reread my December letter, it's all the same issues, but now applied to this. And we seem to be scrambling now to undo the implications of what we previously scrambled to do. So I understand that, but I understand that all the problems you're facing, but I think that the public needs to be more with you by being more fully informed in Friday updates, in more notices, in the release of the minutes, in the types of summaries, and what's the larger plan that we're focusing on. Also, I should just say, looking up the issue of protected status in federal law, protected status applies to people who maintain that status throughout their lives. And students do.
Families with children do not maintain that throughout their lives.
Age discrimination.
And they are a protected class.
Age is not
45 and over.
Age discrimination.
If you look up there, you know what states protect college students as a protected class?
Potentially New Hampshire in 2 weeks.
And some
Yeah, but I think
states have protected.
What was that?
Some states are protecting gun owners as a protected class.
Well, they hold on to their guns forever usually.
Are you arguing that students are not a protected class?
Well,
they're
Right
not
now,
now
they're
in New
not.
Hampshire,
And is that
I'm
right,
not
that,
sure.
they should be
It's not a
discriminated
common
on?
Well,
thing.
you said that,
It's
well,
about
let's get
the-
in,
You know, when
No,
people.
I'd like
well,
to talk
I mean,
about
it
that
is-
later,
Yeah.
actually.
I think we have to wait and see what Concord does, because they keep adjusting to what we're trying to adjust to. Really, the protected class issue came up because of an attempt to get around the last adjustment. So, you know, I think we're just creating more of the problems that we were trying to
Well,
to avoid. But it would be very
what-
rare for students to be a protected
All right.
class
Is there
in any
another
state in the country.
Yeah, there's
It might
another
happen.
person that wants
But
to-
it might
We
be
have one
challenged
more.
because, you know, even the student, you know, the literature on students, they often admit they're not the best neighbors, is different from.
But that's irrelevant at this point.
But anyway, I think the point is that we probably wouldn't be facing that right now if we hadn't already tried to get around the prior. The prior.
We're already humming on it.
We were already
phrasing,
getting
so.
complaints about it, so.
So, okay.
Anyway, good luck.
We good? Thank you. Matt?
Good evening. Matt Kamanchak, Thompson Lane. I promise to be brief. What leapt out at me when I looked at the definition of lodging house was the number 16, and also the language on a permanent or transient basis. I don't know the precise definition of transient, if there is one, but I would hope that would be discussed. Also, the desirability of large unsupervised residences that are filled with transients, right? And, pardon me.
If you want, I can give you a real quick question to answer transient.
Sure.
All right. Transient is basically short-term, less than 6 months.
Okay, thank you. And then, so I looked at the definition, and I also looked at the definition of hotel and inn, and in the first words in the definition of a hotel are a commercial operation offering multiple sleeping rooms or suites, right? And the inn, I believe, it also says a commercial operation, and I believe it's 4 to 6 rooms. And so this lodging house with 16 permitted residents, permitted transient residents, would be somewhere in between an inn and a hotel, but not really different in any significant way from a hotel or inn, large inn, other than that it would be unsupervised. So not owner occupied, in other words. So to me, the lodging house is by far the most problematic of the three, and I would hope that you would, try to lower the number of permitted residents, and also arrange for it to be owner occupied, so as to limit the negative externalities and suffered by other residents. And we've heard about the narrow lots and so forth. I think that's important. I would just echo. I endorse the comments that have already been made by Mr. Whittington as well as by members of the public tonight. There was one other thing. What sort of shocks the conscience here is the putting of a commercial enterprise out in a rural district. It just seems seems to defy common sense for some of the reasons given in terms of like the practicality of transportation, the preservation of rural character, which is endorsed in the master plan, et cetera. So it seems to fly in the face of the master plan, as Cardin Welsh mentioned. It seems to fly in the face of common sense in terms of creating a walkable downtown. You talk a lot about wanting to have a robust commercial core. Well, putting 16 people out in a pasture is not a good way to do that. So I hope that you will, and one final point, I guess, I think it's quite common to have residential uses within a commercial district, but to have a commercial, I think when you're going to have impose a commercial use on a residential district, somehow I think the bar should be a lot higher, because when people move into neighborhoods, residential neighborhoods, they have an expectation that they're going to continue to be able to live in a residential district, not have a hotel or quasi-hotel put up next to them because there is a perceived need for housing in that area. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Can I ask a question? And you can slap me later for asking him a question, all right?
You want, Matt?
Yeah, Matt.
Matt, could you come back?
for just a second?
Richard would like to ask you something.
So,
Well, yeah, if
what
he's
I
gonna
heard you
answer, he's
say
gotta be-
was, you prefer it to be, you made the point of owner occupied. We heard concerns earlier that the owner is supplying the best drugs at the place. So I'm wondering if, professional management or supervision of some other sort addresses your concerns or it doesn't.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, a hotel has professional management. It's not owner occupied, right? So that would be, that's why I said lodging house seems to be the most problematic of the three definitions. Hotel is not owner occupied. Inn is, I believe, owner occupied. And this proposed lodging house definition, I see as fitting in the middle of those two. You're welcome.
Do we want to close the public hearing?
No, let's not. We're having some fun.
I move to close the public hearing.
Let's take a second and we can have discussion.
All right, and then I'll second it for
All right,
discussion purposes.
So the reasons why we would or wouldn't. I mean, we at this point, we know we're not going to be making a decision on whether or not to
Not
advance
tonight.
it. We could perform some deliberation on it, right, with a public hearing open, okay? And that way, if let's say we want to get more public input at the next meeting, we can, because we've left it open, as opposed to closing it and then having to republish and delay even more potentially. So that would be the reason why we might want to keep it open tonight. Does that make sense, Gary?
I withdraw my motion.
All right, cool.
But no matter what, we're going to need to republish the text of this, right?
Oh, yeah.
If we modify it
Significantly.
significantly, yes.
But we're probably not-
What
we're
is,
not-
So it probably,
what does significant mean? I think
Well-
if you modify it at all, we need to make it.
if we modify it, then the new draft would go into the packet, so it would get, and we would publish it, yes.
But would we have to have a different public hearing for that, is I think the question, isn't it?
That is the question. Is
it an ongoing, like if you adjusted this
in
set
any
point?
way,
It's not
in any way, it would seem that you would almost, whether we continue this public hearing or have a net new one, it's just like maybe a 2-week difference, but.
Right, so why have that 2-week difference? So if we keep it open and we deliberate and we make some substantial
We
changes.
do it with applications all the time. Applications change, but we keep the public hearing
We
open.
don't have to advertise.
That's a little
and
different than
give 2
zoning,
weeks. We just keep the public hearing
True.
open.
Is that okay, Michael?
Well, if you make a significant change, you'd have to re-advertise.
No.
Well, what if is a significant change changing where it's allowed?
Well, but you've also,
So if you take,
you've also approached it in a way recently that is,
All right,
you have responded to something, say, where the council, I guess with the council initiated thing, you sent it back to them, but you've had additional suggestions, leaving it to the council, and in those cases, you did not have to re-advertise. But since this is starting with you, if you make a significant change, you'd have to re-advertise.
even if it's improvements based on public comments?
Then we should just close.
Probably. All right.
So that's, I think, then
It's
we
a good
might as
question.
well.
It depends. It depends. I mean,
Close it.
it depends if people are disenfranchised by a modification such that a member of the public might reasonably have wanted to speak again. If they knew about this change, you have to re-advertise. If it's not particularly significant, or it's not something where somebody would reasonably be disenfranchised by making this adjustment, you can make it. So it's kind of a little bit case by case.
Okay, so let's make it easy. We'll close it and then.
Gary, make your motion again.
I move to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, it's closed. So I do want to, we may not deliberate tonight, but
it's
I do have a comment I want to say. It was mentioned earlier by Josh, we have some people in town who are acting as a microphone directly to Concord. They're not the only people, though, okay? All the students who come to UNH, they go home and they tell their parents what's happening, what's going on, how they feel, what their experience here has been like, right? And their parents then become elected representatives to Concord. So any bad will that we've generated, or that Kane or Plymouth or Lebanon, or Hanover has generated, has been accumulating for quite a while, and it's beginning to backlash. And the question, somebody raised the question earlier, what is it Concord really wants? They want us to take the handcuffs off and just let the students go wherever they want. Not where we want, where they want.
Everyone.
That's what the end line in Concord is trying to be. And we're trying to find something where it's not quite that.
Got it.
I'm just going to make a plug because my son will be in Hanover either next year or the following year for graduate school. We're very excited. But I will say that the housing situation is real. It's a problem. He's late acceptance. Finding housing is brutal. Now, that's a fact. I'm not going to say what the policy recommendation there is. I'm just going to say as a parent who's looking at a student that's going to go there, forced into a housing situation that seems very overpriced, very underserviced, with no supply, and then you look at what he could get at other schools, you say, holy cow, that's I'm not going to say the word problem, but it's real. And so for the people that are encountering it, it's real. And then for the people that live here, I think we're trying to find a balance. That's the challenge here. But I will say that it's a real situation, and I'll just mention that as I look to Hanover.
So I think we need to.
I have the text of the bill if people would like to hear it. Okay. So the text of the bill, this will be a new paragraph regarding dwelling unit occupancy in RSA 674-16, which is the paragraph that basically says what we have power over. And it says, in its exercise of the powers granted under this subdivision, the legislative body of a city, town, village, district, or county in which there are located unincorporated towns or unorganized places shall not adopt any ordinance that restricts the number of occupants of any dwelling unit to less than 2 occupants per bedroom, and the governing body thereof shall not enforce any such ordinance. Such legislative body shall not adopt any ordinance based on the familial or non-familial relationships or marital status, occupation, employment, educational status, including but not limited to scholastic enrollment or academic achievement at any level among the occupants of the dwelling units, including but not limited to college students, and the governing body thereof shall not enforce any such ordinance. Nothing in this section shall prohibit the enforcement of the state building code or state fire code. So they're basically leaving us with just fire code as an enforcement mechanism. And the thing that we're going to have to, the main reason I want the lawyer to look at it is to make sure that even that allows us to say that we can keep it out of the RA. Because I'm not even sure right now we're going to be able to keep it out of the RA, and if we can't, I'm not sure what good passing it's going to be.
So, and I just want to clarify that this bill is this ordinance is kind of the opposite, is trying to achieve the opposite of what many people are concerned about.
Yeah.
The planning board and the housing task force have been focused on trying to find more housing opportunities. And the attainable housing ordinance indeed did that. The effort was, how do we expand housing opportunities in Durham? And you will see a draft coming forward in the next month or two from the housing task force that's trying to do the same thing, trying to expand zoning to make it less restrictive, to expand housing opportunities. But this is doing the opposite. This is not coming from an effort to create more housing. It is seen as the one hopefully remaining tool that the town of Durham has to regulate unrelated occupancy in single-family houses and neighborhoods. So we're on your side here. We're trying to come up with make this tool usable for regulation. This is not about trying to create housing opportunities. So we're trying to thread this very difficult needle of this strange world that Concord is posing for us.
Can you read the very beginning of what you said there again? No less than, how many people per bedroom?
Two. No less than two. So if you have a four-bedroom house, that would be 8 people.
Right.
We would have to allow 8 people there no matter where they are.
Right.
And you could create other rooms.
But
and turn
now
them
by
into
fire
bedrooms.
code, we would say, oh, that's fine, but if you hit that magic 5 outsiders, you got to be sprinkled, and you become a lodging house.
Yeah, it's a whole different thing.
So we're trying to control the lodging house aspect of that.
Well, I'm going to bring this up again because it came up before. Why don't we control the landlord? There's nothing in there.
That's what they want us to do. They want us to control the landlord.
They being...
If it's a nuisance house, treat it as a nuisance house and use your nuisance ordinances to control the bad behavior. That is the position that Concord has.
They being
that these
Concord,
people who are that the people that are pushing these bills through, that's the position that they want us to take.
You have an unruly house and set your code enforcement officer over, which if it's...
Or the police or whoever.
The police or whatever, and that's viable, but there's noise doesn't take effect until a certain time.
So I would contend that it protects the interests of a business that's here in Durham that we should embrace, all right? And that is the student housing landlords, all right? There's certainly many of them that have a lot of bedrooms, right? A lot of beds. And their economic model is far different than someone looking to get 6 kids or 8 kids in on faculty, right?
Right.
Vastly different. So if you go to them and say, look, there is a registration process to be a landlord in this town, and here it is.
We don't have that.
No, but maybe that's the tack that we should take.
That's a town council thing.
Yeah,
That's not a planning, but we don't have authority to do that. Town council has authority to do that.
May I ask?
Gary?
Okay, so to me, there are really 2 issues for me. The first issue is the need to change the definition of student rental and to use the lodging house definition instead. And I don't think it's really in bad faith as to Concord, because it does actually remove students as a category, and it deals neutrally with all occupants.
There, yeah.
So I don't see the problem with it. But the second issue is, why is it necessary to, when when R and RC were previously restricted as to student rental, why is it necessary to change the chart of uses to permit lodging houses in those zones? And
Gary,
I
that
say-
ain't gonna fly. I mean, you took us on that walk before. I don't think that's gonna survive the day. If I'm a betting person, I don't think that what you're describing is gonna make it. This was initiated by us or council.
Us.
It's not gonna go
We
back.
can
Yeah.
tweak it all we want.
So you're gonna see that gone.
Okay, so that's gonna, that was,
Don't you think? I mean, is there a consensus here?
Probably. It felt
can't
like it to
support
me.
Gonna see what gone?
I'm gonna see boarding house or rooming house, whatever we're gonna call it,
Lodging house.
removed from R and RC.
And just leave them as PO, CH, and C, which is what we had.
Which was where we had before.
Most likely, yeah. I
We did
expect that.
allow student rentals in the student rental.
We haven't gotten that far, Gary,
Yeah.
right? It's just,
Okay,
we
yeah,
weren't
I
going,
mean, 'cause,
because it's already 10 o'clock,
Yeah,
but
the reasoning was because we had
it's the
others that
starting.
already
Yeah, so-
existed there,
So
there's no
if you're
other
asking
argument
why it
We're not
started
married
there,
to it, yeah.
it started there so we could have the conversation, okay?
Yeah,
To
let's
see
see what
how
happens.
whether or not it would fly. That's why it went in there, okay? And it looks like it's not going to fly.
okay, okay.
Why do you allow the, I agree on that, most likely. Why are all the senior carve-outs allowed in all of those areas and not this?
Again, we tend to discriminate for and against various groups. And that is actually one of the things the Housing Task Force is going to get rid of. We're going to get rid of all the lines that have senior.
I mean, and the senior care facilities, senior housing.
Those we keep.
multi-unit,
Yeah,
senior
we're keeping
housing
senior
complex,
care.
Senior housing, single family, P across everything for essentially. And so,
Right, which is why when you look at the RKG report, we have lots of two types of housing.
Senior housing
and to me,
And-
it would seem that you would, if I'm approaching a senior, I'm a senior, I should want to be centrally located. I don't want to be in rural.
Well-
I mean, to speak to being in a senior facility, I don't want to be, RC,
They get-
R, I want to be downtown.
Yeah, well, it
I mean,
depends.
so
Yeah.
there's
That's a
lot.
conversation for another night.
Yeah, that's not tonight, but.
But it is an area that's being
But there was
suggested
an
for
argument
changes.
about, there was a discussion about, well, where would you want to be? I think it's kind of coming around everyone,
Well, that's like if you look at
All
PO,
the people in Riverwood's like being walking distance. I know
Yeah, they
that.
do.
You know,
but if you look at like PO, it allowed multi-unit housing in PO for seniors.
No one else.
No one else, just seniors. Well, it's all student housing, so statistically speaking, it's a student housing zone, right?
Yeah.
But if you're going to allow multi-housing, it needs to be multi-unit
Again,
housing,
another
not
night. That's-
senior.
that's-
Sorry,
that's not even on this
I'm
topic
sorry.
tonight. That's another
But
night.
so that's something that needs to be fixed.
And it will be, there
All
will
right.
be a discussion about it.
And just one more, before Beth spoke, I was actually sort of against, I was aligned with the not allowing it in R. And then after the presentation, I was like, well, those are actually pretty big lots. I mean, there's space there. I'm not sure why the argument that there's space there and I heard 1.2 acres is small. Well, 1.2 acres downtown isn't small. So I guess on the surface I was aligned with not doing it, and then the more you spoke, the more I was like, well, I agree. I don't want to be down there either, and I don't want to have to drive, and I don't think we should create another situation for people to drive. But then I was like,
So are we going to talk about this tonight, or are we moving to the next item?
We're going to move to the next.
We're going to do the next one.
Yeah, so we're going to,
We're gonna-
well, what do you guys want? We're going to be skipping item 10. But we have an item 11, review of prior year and priorities for upcoming year.
No.
We can delay that one.
I don't have my brain capacity to that at 10.
and on the disposition of item,
And 12 can wait. I mean, there's
Those can all wait.
there's nothing, I don't see anything on the rest of the agenda that we have to get to tonight.
No.
Great.
so
No.
for item 9, is it is it passed back to sort of professional staff and administrative?
No, we're going
No,
to,
we'll
we
be
need to
discussing it.
deliberate, because we haven't had a chance to actually create the consensus yet.
Okay.
It feels like we have a consensus on a couple areas that are going in a particular way, but we need to talk about, as you were saying, we need to each have our opportunity to put forth our opinions and logic in association with what we just heard from the public. And then have the group discussion and get it all out in the open. And we don't have time for that tonight.
Okay, thanks.
I don't think we want to go till 11:15.
No.
No.
Right? So we will
Correct.
pick this up at our next meeting. It can be the first item, I think, right?
Oh, June 25th, yeah. And we have one other item on there that I know of.
What's that?
It's a modification for the cottages. It shouldn't be real time consuming.
Well, then, this will be the second thing on the agenda, then the cottages will come first.
So,
That was the email you sent about a walkway or a boardwalk or something,
Right.
right? Yeah.
so the lodging house would be second, and the public hearing's closed, right?
Yes.
Yes.
And then we can also pick up on priorities for the year and conservation subdivisions.
Yeah,
June
let's
25th?
get the priorities for the year up front. You know, after lodging house.
So cottages, lodging house, prior year.
Actually,
upcoming-
let's put the, I mean, what if folks think about putting the review after the cottages? At least that way we'll get it off the agenda and
Yeah,
then we
have
can do the
it, yeah,
lodging
have
house.
it, yeah, yeah.
And that might set, I don't think there's anything in that discussion that will affect the
Yeah.
lodging house, but you never know.
And then can we also do that discussion whether to amend the rules of procedure for late submission?
Yeah.
For
Under
I
other
heard
business.
an awful lot of feedback.
And I had, and I made a note too that I wanted to, since we're talking about next week's agenda, methods to get more information to the public.
I think
Yeah.
one thing that certainly would help is that when we issue a zoning change, we say why. And it's written out and it's on the website. It's just not a change in definition and a change in use tables. So the introduction that Michael gave tonight should be in written format.
Yeah.
And that should be on the web. So if we're just out here to rile everybody up, we can say that right up front, you know, this is just to get everyone out here. And if there's some real reasoning behind it, we can certainly, you follow me, you look confused.
No, I'm trying, so you're saying that just more of an explanation yeah, in the memo? At the start of the memo?
In the actual, the change.
In the
that's being
town
made,
planner's write-up.
synopsis
Right.
about,
Oh.
this is the zoning change that we
Right.
see in our packet, but on top, there's a synopsis. Why the hell are we doing this? And just
Yeah.
explain the impetus for it.
Right.
All right.
I agree with that.
Does that, and I totally agree, I kind of think executive summary, one paragraph
Yeah.
executive summary. I'd also like to see, last updated dates, so that when I look at the
You've
table
talked
of
about that,
uses,
yeah.
I can see when that was
Yeah.
last updated, because sometimes I'm like, what am I looking at online, and is it accurately?
Is that going to be an easy fix, or do we have to open these things up and have someone go through
It's not gonna be an easy
and
fix.
exhaustively look at when the last time,
That's going to be exhaustive work.
yeah.
Or like
We
that
could start,
moving
I mean,
forward, that Word
we
document
could
is
start doing, yeah, we could start doing it going forward, but, I mean, Word docs and PDFs, I think, treat it two different ways.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you take a Word doc that has that information and create a PDF out of it, whether it stays.
Well, if the Word document just has a field that says last, in the footer or someplace,
Yeah.
it says last
Yeah, it could be in a
updated date and
footnote.
last updated by, just something so I can see when the table of uses, how old is that?
Right.
Because when I look at that, like,
We
I
don't.
understand.
We
I
don't
think you
note,
brought it up a couple times, and I think
Yeah.
it's a valid point.
we don't note changes on them.
Well, we have a record of it upstairs, but you
Yeah,
have to
but that's
go through
very,
it.
that's
Yeah.
not gonna help.
Yeah, but when you're reading it, you don't know if this is, if this particular paragraph I'm reading is 3 months old or 30 years old.
that's right. And in Dover, and just while we're talking about it, because in Dover, they have a version history, so when you're reading that, they'll show you the previous version of that.
Yeah.
Now, whether our website and all that supports that ability, I don't know. My guess is we probably don't. but the ability to sort of look back and see what was it before this thing was updated, that's very helpful. In software, we do that all the time. It's version control that comes. We just live on that, and you can roll back that version as far as you want. You can see exactly every change that was made, and, so whether, maybe we should store all this stuff in GitHub, I don't know, but the versioning sequence would be better. But that would be helpful to do that.
No argument, you're right.
So are we set?
I think we're set if the
I'll make a
conversation-
motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
Seconded by Heather. All in favor?
Aye.
Goodness.
No.